Fuck, I forgot my dollar bills.
You're gonna need some hundreds. I will accept nothing less.
Canadian?
Can you take Venmo?
Yeah,
We don't have that here.
Venmo is open.
We're stuck with
What is up, you guys? Welcome back to More Marxists Than You Can Handle. People filtering in. Hi, welcome.
Hello.
I'm Gian.
I'm Sam.
And we have with us Eric and Fox. Say hi.
Yeah. Hi, Z's.
Our dear loves from the Red Lettuce podcast. And we have our dear Mila. Hello, Mila.
Hello.
Mila
From Huge If True and the Unacceptable podcasts. Wow.
I know
Can't
too.
one is never enough.
Decadence.
And
We have a fun story on that. So.
yeah, no, I'm sure that will come up. And for those of you in the chat, welcome. We're so glad you're here. Do say hello. I see some of you saying hi.
Can you say hi in there?
So the program for tonight, Esperanza will be along shortly, hopefully, and then our dear boy River.
There's Esperanza.
Oh, good. Esperanza is just coming in now. Our dear boy River, unfortunately, was affected by recent hurricanes.
Oh, no.
He just got his internet access back like about 20 minutes ago, so he will be on maybe, but he's just getting his house unflooded. So we might see River along the way. I was like to say he was tempting. He was spitting in the eye of God by being River. Honestly, of course his house was going to flood. No, he's okay. Don't worry. How's everyone doing tonight?
Rough one. Fine. Feeling a little washed out by this light. So
looking good.
Eric's a pretty one anyway. Oh, stop.
You're all beautiful, girls. Don't
You are beautiful, no matter what they say. Well, it's the new year. Shabbat Shalom.
Yes.
Oh, Shabbat Shalom.
Happy Rosh Hashanah.
Esperanza, throw us a thumbs up if you're ready to go live. Cool.
Okay, cool.
Esperanza Fonseca, welcome, my dear. How are you doing today?
Sorry, my Wi-Fi. I'm at my friend's house, and the Wi-Fi, the whole setup is just a complete mess right now. So,
well, the lighting is great.
Yeah,
you have very, very good like direct lighting.
Amazeballs.
Yeah,
Amazeballs USA.
Yeah, Esperanza wins the lighting award.
I love that lip color too. Yeah, I want that. The lip color is revolutionary.
Well, I mean, enough of the funny business. I think it's really important that we just take a moment, all hold hands. Actually, I wanted to sing a little something. Imagine there's no heaven. Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Rip to a real one. We're all big fans, right? Everyone. In the back.
Yeah, I mean, gargoyles are great.
Yeah. We are not mourning the loss of Ruth, apparently.
It's only saddening how distraught some of my friends are about this. I feel bad that they're upset, and I just feel really conflicted because on the one hand, fuck the Supreme Court, like the entire idea that people are appointed for the rest of their life on no, I don't like that at all. And like
not that long a life as it turns out.
I don't know. No, I'm not sad about it. I mean, she can fuck right off with the rest of the Supreme Court.
Nature is healing. We are the virus.
There are class enemies, so it's like I don't know why people are so connected to this one person who has done horrible things for Indigenous people and working class people as well. So, I mean, that's what they're designed to do. That's what they're there for, to protect the interests of the capitalist class. So,
yeah, strange. We're not sad about the queen of liberal legitimation.
I feel like everyone thinks she's the single person alone who did Roe v. Wade for not knowing how.
She wasn't on the court at the time.
No, I know, but I feel like everyone's like, she's the preserver. She's the one that did all of this. She's the one that fought for all the women's rights in America, just her alone. And it's like, for
there were
one,
no social movements behind that at all. It was all no, right. It was just one person. It's just one person who, like, you know, did it all. It wasn't social movements. No, that doesn't happen. That doesn't change anything.
For one, no one knows how the Supreme Court works, clearly.
Well, also, Sotomayor and Kagan are both kind of like to the left of Ginsburg, as much as they're both libs or whatever. But like, and it wasn't the whole thing that Kagan's a lesbian. She like played softball in college and shit like that. She's like just a coded lesbian? Come on, if we're gonna stand any woman on the Supreme Court, which we're not, but I mean, that would be my choice. You know.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to let everyone introduce themselves first and talk a little bit about where they're coming from,
what are you
what
drinking?
they're up to, and what you're drinking. Mila, why don't you kick us off? To explain the multiple podcasts.
Okay, yeah, I'll have to explain that too. So yeah, I'm Mila. I'm a co-host of Unacceptable and of Huge If True. So I had started Unacceptable with my friend Ken. We have like if you listen to Unacceptable, you kind of know that we have very different political views. But Ken is just kind of struggling right now a little in with the Zoom interviews and stuff. I don't think he it's just not really working for him, but
I all relate there.
Well, I still wanted to, so he just kind of wanted to bow out of doing stuff with political guests, especially on Zoom, because he felt like he couldn't really push back without seeming rude because of Zoom etiquette. And he explains it on our last episode. So I still wanted to do one where we engage with other people. So I started one called Huge If True with some other people that you might be familiar with. So the Epic Department on Twitter, also previously known as Norms Respecter, and a bunch of other, he gets banned like every day, but we love him. And with Nihal, her Twitter is not Nihal. Egyptian Marxist, really awesome person. And then my friend Stefan, who's a PhD student in poli-sci. So our first interview with that one was with Norman Finkelstein, which was quite a way to kick off a podcast. He is a really dynamic, interesting dude. I don't think I've ever met anyone like him. So if you haven't listened to that, maybe check it out. Most of it's him talking. But I mean, it's good. Like he clearly knows his stuff. Even though, I mean, he and I don't agree on everything, but yeah, so that's me and the new pods. And in terms of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I'm in Canada, but like I'm a law student, so obviously everyone's talking about it. I am drinking.
I like that you think you're not subject to our laws. That's very charming. It's very quaint.
And I'm drinking what you probably think I'm drinking, which is
a White Claw.
Are you respecting the claw?
I'm respecting the claw, but I only have 3 with me, so I might have to switch to wine if I keep past that. So
damn,
I might have to betray the claw.
Well, happy to report everyone has us for 2 hours and 45 minutes. That's your countdown clock. You'll be rid of us then.
You're all stuck here now.
Yep. I'm not stuck in here with you. You're in here with me.
You're all stuck in our dune hole.
Exactly.
2 hours and 45 minutes.
Well, Eric Fox, please tell us who you are, what the Red Lettuce is, and what you're drinking.
Go first. Well, fine. I'll go first. Well, the Red Lettuce is a YouTube show where we talk about political things that are going on in the world, and we talk about ourselves a lot because we are really important. Yes, we're very narcissistic, so it's very important. And yeah, we actually have an interview that we're about to release with Mila. We did one recently with her, so we're very excited to release that.
Stealing our guests.
And yeah, well, what are we drinking? I am drinking Pinot Noir.
Beautiful.
Ooh.
I was drinking raspberry hibiscus tea, but I'm going to switch to rose lemonade here in a moment.
Beautiful.
Bougie.
Yeah, but also on the Red Lettuce, we talk a lot about foreign policy and like animal rights and shit like that. Because we think that animal liberation is crucial for human liberation. It definitely is. It's all connected, sweethearts.
Fox, can I ask, have you always been a sober comrade, or is this?
Yeah, I've never been drunk in my entire life.
Wow, I don't know what that's like, but respect.
Very boring.
No, that's boring. That's fine.
I've had an alcoholic beverage.
Yeah.
But like I've never.
Just not for you.
On my 21st birthday, I was the designated driver. Like.
I mean, no,
My cousin got wasted for me, and we did karaoke, and it was at a small town bar in rural Iowa, and I spilled the raspberry Smirnoff that I had, and I got a Coke, and I drove everybody home.
I think that's wonderful, because I think it's important that somebody is there to sort of operate the revolution after about 9 p.m. when I'm no longer.
Yes, we definitely need sober
cogent
people, for sure.
So, as I said, in solidarity, comrade.
Esperanza.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your org affiliations, any global media empires you run, and what you're drinking tonight?
I run Bloomberg Media. If I were in the bourgeoisie, I wouldn't be in that faction of the ruling class.
No.
I'd be in much more of an exciting one. Yeah, my name is Esperanza. I don't have my drink yet because I've been so incredibly focused on trying to get this Wi-Fi to work. But I will be drinking hard seltzer vodka.
Ooh.
Yeah.
My friends are very organic right now, so it's literally all they have.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so no sugar. And then I'm with Affirm, Association of Feminists Fighting Fascism, Imperialism, and Marginalization and Refeudalization. And yeah, excited to talk about Marxism and Supreme Court with y'all.
Sam, who the fuck are you? Why are you sitting next to me?
I'm Sam. I'm the co-host and one of the editors at Twink Revolution podcast and media publication.
Global media empire.
We're gay, alcoholic Marxists. And we cover everything from culture to politics. And we just had our 1 year.
Yes, culture to politics, that wide range.
Yeah, that wide range. And we just had our 1 year anniversary yesterday. So yeah. Oh, and we're drinking.
Well, here I'll do what
Okay.
we're drinking because it's my bottle of wine. We're drinking a delightful Sonoma Coast Primitivo. It's an Italian grape varietal. We'll provide tasting notes throughout the show.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good. We're drinking red wine. Affordably priced red wine.
Is it boxed?
No, it's in a classy bottle. Here, Sam, hand the bottle over so you can get it in frame. Look at that. See that? Nice?
Hello, Esperanza's. I'm assuming boyfriend.
No, that's my best friend.
Oh, okay.
Not my boyfriend.
Sorry for assuming.
Esperanza, can we ask just a detail question? So the other night we were on a fun Zoom with Esperanza, and she came on from like her phone in a car, and then was like, we were chatting away, it was great, and then she goes, oh shit, logs off and is like, we're almost out of gas, have to deal with this. Did you deal with it?
Yeah, so I don't understand like what it is with men sometimes and the decisions that they make, but I was trying to ask my boyfriend, like, we had 4 miles left in the gas tank. And I'm like, why don't you like fill up the tank before it gets to 4 miles? So 4 miles turned into like 1, turned into 0. And I'm trying to navigate us to a gas station. Long story short, his little Honda, saved us.
The little
And
Honda that
we
could.
made it to the gas station. Yes. So thank God Mexicans love Hondas, because maybe if it was like a Ford, we might have been, still on the street.
Still be on the side of the road. Yeah.
Yeah, the Hummer wouldn't have made it that far.
Yeah, the Twink Revolution branded Hummerzine is still parked somewhere.
We
out
still
of gas.
use leaded gas because we care about the environment.
It runs off baby owls. Well, so sorry, we were kicking off a little prematurely on my part. Sorry, but about the notorious RBG. Yes, premature as always. Any thoughts, Esperanza? I think everyone else has started to weigh in on. How are you mourning Ruth Bader Ginsburg?
Is she your feminist icon?
Do we stand a queen?
I'm so sad. No, I'm not. But but I mean, look, for a lot of people, like, she is a symbol, right? A symbol of like a woman ascending to, the highest court in the land. But I think that that's largely a problem. Like, when we turn people who need to be judged actually quite harshly, right? Someone like a Supreme Court justice or a presidential candidate. I mean, these are not people that we should put on a pedestal and absolve them of any criticism. We need to critique them as harshly as we can, because they're in positions of power, regardless of whether they're a woman, queer, trans, brown, black, whatever. And so when we look at her record, she opposed Indigenous sovereignty. Terrible record when it comes to, incarcerating people. And I think in the end of the day, her mission was to defend the settler colonial capitalist state. And that's what she did. And I think a lot of people are just completely blowing this out of proportion. I mean, look, I was working for a public sector union when Janice passed, right? And that was supposed to decimate public sector unions. I think that the big problem is that, if one person dying or, whoever the next president is can appoint someone that can completely undo all the progress that we've won, that's a problem with the system and not just with an individual. And again, that's why I'm a socialist, because I don't think we could just elect someone and make it all great. I think we need to transfer from a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie to a dictatorship of the proletariat, where the progress that we win is actually cemented into our world and can't just be so flimsy that someone dies or a new president gets elected and boom, all the progress we've won has been lost.
Imagine all the people.
Did you guys see the CPUSA did an article titled "We Must Fight to Keep RBG's Legacy Alive"?
What is that? Why would we want to do that? Like,
we must defend the bourgeoisie at all costs.
I think it's interesting that we have like in high school, they're like, oh, the cult of personality of Stalin, right? But we have the personality of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I just think that is like a huge problem.
Yeah.
Well, could I give another prompt maybe? And this is sort of orthogonal to the question of her shitty record and whether libs are losing their fucking minds over her death, and what it means for their comfortable existences. But actually, like there's sort of always a two-pronged response to the death of a prominent figure, particularly a political figure. And let me pre-declare, on the day that Henry Kissinger dies, I am not going to be tasteful. There will be nothing tasteful in my response. I will be mean. However, I think it is important to separate out sort of But as well, if anybody remembers when Osama bin Laden was killed, I thought it was in poor taste. Some of the celebration, even though I was like, whatever, like this is not my friend. Not somebody I know. But so what have you sort of thought about like maybe some of the taste, the taste question, or the decorum question, rather simply the death of an actual human being who, good or bad, is a dead person now, is a person of death. Any thoughts?
Yeah,
feel free to say dance floor, motherfuckers.
I remember when John McCain died, and I like a lot of my liberal friends were like, they're like, oh, I feel so bad for his family, and I don't know. I think John McCain was a terrorist, and they were like, oh, he's a prisoner of war, and I was like, no, we were invading their country.
Right.
Fuck him. I don't feel bad that he died because he did a lot of harm, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg did a lot of harm. And so, a dead imperialist to me is just another dead imperialist. I understand why people are freaked out and upset about this, because our democracy is so flimsy that like things can change dramatically for people just based off of like what one person can do. And like as Esperanza said, it's the system. It's not an individual, right? And I feel the same way about when people try to convince me to vote. Or they're like, if you don't vote, like Donald Trump is going to win. And I'm just like, the ruling class has already won.
Right.
Raytheon is giving money to Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Those are the ruling class options. Those are who they have decided that we are going to vote for.
Right. And it's just really weird to see like, liberals even say out loud then like, oh, well, since she's gone, then everything else is lost. Right. That should really tell you something about what kind of system that you live in. If you really think that one person is the safeguard to your democracy,
right?
Then you really should take into consideration what kind of system you live under, because you live under the dictatorship of capital, and that's who these people on this court serve, is capital.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, well, for them, I think that for them, politics is really not a matter. And I do have the same criticism of some parts of the left, and I've kind of said that already about some anarchists. Not all anarchists, but
oh, you don't like anarchists? Name every anarchist.
I do think that a lot for them, like a lot of politics is just kind of a cultural thing, similar to how Hollywood would work, in the sense that you kind of have your team, and supporting the right people is a sort of proxy for supporting some sorts of ideas. And then if you don't support the correct person in particular, then that whole proxy kind of fades away. But then it's also about like not offending cultural sensibilities. So the issue with Trump is not really about his policies or his policies being different substantially from the Democrats. The issue is that he offends like this sort of aesthetic sensibility that liberals have, and what the culture has as well. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of my hot take.
So do you have anything? I have one thought. I think about the death and the the kind of parading around one's death, and I think there's a. Oh no! What did you do?
Don't worry. All is well.
I think it's really important to point out the differences between whose deaths are worth ridiculing or like celebrating and those who aren't. And I think the anarchists and like many of the like libs in general don't do the distinctions. So for when it comes to the capitalist imperial class who've caused mass slaughter and like deprivation of the working class, I don't really feel bad for people who celebrate in the streets when they die, like Henry Kissinger or like, I don't know, like George Bush. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm so sad. But like, I think when you get to the like, oh, this random soldier from like Kentucky who went to go fight because it was their only option, I think that's kind of tacky because they're still a working person who maybe didn't make the right decision. but I don't think celebrating the death of like a working person who's fighting for or being a victim of imperial war as well is like the same. So like McCain's a bad person because he became like of the capitalist imperial class. He didn't just stay like also he volunteered when he was like from a family of wealth. It's like fuck you, like
and he just kept crashing our beautiful American airplanes.
And
yeah,
the guy could never land.
Yeah, and he supported Ukrainian fascists too. It's like he's a fucking terrible person.
Yeah.
So I've. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, please, Mila.
No, I do think though on that point that there is a tendency among Americans where there's like a lot of sympathy that is available for soldiers of any kind, whether they're working class or not. And even if they're like, I'm not going to hold it against anyone for joining the army in a state of material deprivation. But at the same time, I do think it is quite notable that the kind of sympathy afforded to these people is, or the kind of attention that they have is so much greater than, you know, the people who they're inflicting this damage upon. And I think, you know, it's kind of similar with like Zionism, anti-Zionism, like anti-Zionist Jewish people get so much more attention than like Palestinians do in the discourse on the left, which is fun. They're great. Like they're great. I'm really grateful for their support. I'm not saying that, but I just think it kind of does say something about where we're at. Similarly, like, you know, there are veterans like Mike Preisner, who I think, you know, are doing great things, but I do think it's also notable that there's a lot of emphasis on the pain that war inflicts on veterans of America and not as much emphasis on what these guys have actually done abroad to, say, Iraqis or what, say, NATO has done. Just
well,
yeah.
So I've
like pageantry, patriotism is like what people are really engaging in with all that.
Mm-hmm.
So I've another prompt for you in terms of, I mean, so one of the things I think is fascinating about watching the wailing and gnashing of teeth of the libs about the Supreme Court and now liberal process fetishism kicking into full gear about like, well, the shortest nomination to confirmation time for a Supreme Court justice is 19 days, and actually our precious norms say you can't do it in the last election, blah 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 blah, and it's like, fuck this fucking bourgeois court. However, I'm kind of curious, and you know, for those of you who've given it any thought, I mean, it's always fascinating to think the sort of the liberal conception of where maybe say rights come from, or where do your freedoms come from, is the idea that it's written down on a piece of paper because Ruth Bader Ginsburg's clerks wrote a legal decision for her, and that is where rights come from. As opposed to some idea that there's actually some exercise of power going on that is layered over with a layer of legitimation, which includes institutions like the Supreme Court, like oh yeah, no, you're allowed to do this thing, which apparently wasn't in law. Like we found it in the Constitution. We didn't find it there 30 years ago, but actually it turns out sort of societal norms have changed and the structure of power has changed and what is popular has changed. And suddenly it's in there. Who the fuck knew? Any thoughts on kind of some of this like legitimation stuff and what role the sort of the Supreme Court plays in telling a lovely story about where our beautiful freedoms come from?
Well, I feel like it would be improper of me to weigh in as the Canadian, but
well, at least you're not Russian, am I right?
Well, I love Russian lit.
You also are the I think the most legally trained person on around here. I could be wrong, but I feel way in, Mila.
Something interesting to me as I study Canadian law is that in America, the states have a lot more power than and independence than in Canada. Because, for instance, our criminal code is federal. So, like, anything that's a crime is a crime all across Canada. And the reason for that is so that you can expect some sort of consistency and certainty. But I recently learned that in America, that different things could be a crime in different states. And so I think that's kind of wild. And I think, you know, I could see the appeal of the Supreme Court on ruling on things like Roe v. Wade or whatever, because maybe people are seeking that kind of federal certainty.
I'm trying to bring back sodomy laws in California by popular voter proposition.
Right. But I do think that there is something profoundly anti-democratic about judicial review. And Jeremy Waldron, who is definitely a lib, but honestly one of my favorite lib writers, has written a critique of judicial review. And that was what he's kind of saying is like, you know, we're giving 9 unelected judges the ability to nullify the will of the people. So I like, even if you look at the issue of Roe versus Wade, which I don't think will be overturned, but now, according to American polling, only 28% around 28% support making overturning Roe v. Wade. But if you stack the courts properly, you might be able to, hypothetically. Now that seems very anti-democratic.
But isn't that very telling? Is why we like put it this way, because I share your view. I do not believe Roe v. Wade is in danger in this country, and the reason is precisely what you just said. There's very minority support for overturning it, in the same way that gay marriage was judicially reviewed many times up until 2015, when suddenly federally they found a reason for that to be legalized. It just so happened to be a little bit after the tipping point where that became a popular position in the US. And this is sort of, I guess, what I was trying to zero in on is the lie of all of this. It sort of pretends that these rights are like, oh, we're just doing this perfect scientific legal shit. It's like, no, it's a fucking political institution.
Right.
And that's what you learn. That's what you learn in law school.
Yeah.
Like, you know, all of my, like, the first thing you learn is that like law and society are intertwined. Like you cannot, like the law is not a strict rule book. It's always being impacted by our social circumstances. And so even the Supreme Court, like even though it is anti-democratic and represents elite interests, there is some sort of way that popular opinion does impact it. But I do think right now that a lot of liberals have the incentive to try and make it look like their rights are going to be taken away. And it's kind of fun because usually conservatives like to take take rhetoric away from the leftists. You know, they like to co-opt it for imperialism and whatever. Now I think liberals are going into the conservative playbook and using this rhetoric of having something I hold dear is being taken away from me. And that's actually something that's very popular. It's a very popular tactic that really works for conservatives a lot of the time in winning people over. It kind of riles up a hysteric frenzy, and it's kind of like, you know, oh my God, like I'm so oppressed, I'm a victim. So it kind of, first of all, it fuels their narcissism. And then it also, because it makes it seem like they're important enough to be targeted. And then it also makes it seem, it's a very convenient rhetorical play. And you're probably going to see that in your next few weeks leading up into the election. If you don't elect us, if you don't elect Joe Biden, you're going to have this taken away from you. Just in the same way that you have people being like, if you elect Bernie Sanders, you're going to get your cheeseburgers taken away from you. Like, that's just the playbook. So that's kind of amusing to see.
Esperanza, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I'm also okay with taking cheeseburgers away from people.
Yeah.
We should try to make our food a little healthier.
Go get away.
I was actually arguing with my friend about whether or not like meat production really, you know, impacts climate change. But back to like just, you know, the structure of the United States government and democracy. I mean, I don't think any of it is democratic. Like one of the first things that I learned as a union organizer on the shop floor, you know, representing workers at Disneyland, is that elections are the most undemocratic thing in our society. I mean, elections are the absolute easiest way for an employer to intimidate, suppress, repress their workers from voting in their own interests. You know, ballot measures. Like, I live in the state of California, and every year, workers make real gains, like real progress in their labor rights. And some millionaire or billionaire swoops in, dumps a shit ton of money into some proposition, uh, creates all this propaganda to make it sound like it's advancing the public interest. But in reality, it's actually, you know, taking us back on workers' rights. You know, and so I think elections in general are just so easy to, you know, to really intimidate people. I think also, you know, the existence of the Senate in the United States, the Senate would not exist if, you know, the founding fathers did not want the so-called elite. I don't like that term because it's not very scientific, but, you know, those with money and power to have, you know, an electoral body where they will always, you know, be represented. And that's why the Senate has so many privileges that, you know, the House doesn't. So I think our entire government is structured to be a veneer of democracy, but really allow power to remain in the same hands that it always has.
Esperanza, I'm still stuck on, sorry, you were working on organizing Disneyland. You're telling me it's not the most magical place in the universe? The woodland creatures organize themselves, surely.
So just really briefly, I don't know if anyone watching has wanted to work at Disneyland, but you know, they pretend like their workers are not workers. So they call them
cast
cast
members, right?
And each worker has to fit into the story. So one time I was representing a Black woman who wore her hair in box braids, and her manager told her that that hairstyle didn't fit into the story and she needs to change it because she's a cast member. So that's the kind of crap they pull all the time on their workers. And I've been escorted out of Disneyland by Mickey Mouse police more times than I'd like to admit.
Eric Fox, any thoughts on our beautiful democracy for all these horrible, nasty women shitting on our beautiful democracy? Or
So first, what I want to say is that after. So Governor, we're in Illinois, and I think, if I remember correctly, Governor Pritzker signed a law that would encode Roe v. or abortion rights in our Constitution. And I think there are more states that, like if they did overturn Roe versus Wade, there are so few states that would lose abortion rights. And so I think if there's anything that's any reason to be afraid, it's those few states. But a bigger issue for me is that under Democratic and Republican administrations all over the country, lots of abortion clinics are closing. Access to abortion is being stripped away legally by blocking Medicare for all, and closing health clinics that do abortions all over the country, even in states where abortion is legal, or even in states where abortions would be legal if Roe versus Wade was overturned.
You just need to go into an ICE facility and you get a free hysterectomy.
No.
Yes. I mean, it's
so bad.
It's so fucked
really
up.
bad.
That's really fucked up.
Yeah.
Shame on
Sorry, I
you.
didn't quite mean to deadpan that one comedically. I really mean holy fucking shit.
Yeah, seriously.
Which sadly is nothing new, right? Like,
Right.
and I was actually reflecting on how, like, the control of migrant women's reproduction is really, like, central to how the United States handles immigrant women. Like, even immigrant women farm workers are exposed to chemicals that either make them infertile, disrupt their menstrual cycle, give their children birth defects, including cancer. It's really bad.
Yeah. If I can make
I was going to add to that is, liberals really tend to think that, history is this linear thing, that it just everything gets progressively better with time, but that's just not what happens. Like they think everything rests on people's attitudes and whatever, but it's not. It's all about power and which class is in power. It's the capitalist class who are in power, and they can take away our civil liberties with a single stroke.
Mhm.
And that's what's happening. That's what's happening throughout, not just here, but also in Europe and these social democracies, which like liberals and social democrats like love to proclaim as like this like beacon of the future. It's not. They're capitalist, and their rights are being taken away. Their concessions. What we have right now, what we're discussing, are concessions that are given to us by the ruling elites, the capitalist class. And in order to really cement those, is like what Esperanza said, is we need the dictatorship of the proletariat. We need to take power in order to make sure that our rights and civil liberties are cemented, and that we can create more for everybody, expand it to everybody across, not just here, but across the globe.
You fucking tanky.
I know.
I think also kind of expanding on the point of like the government not being democratic in the first place is really important. I think not enough left-wingers are discussing that the whole point of the Supreme Court is to reinforce property law, property rights. Like the Constitution's core function is to ensure market logic and property rights. I mean, we can look at the FDR New Deal, where the Commerce Clause was used over and over and over again to basically remove things like child labor laws in certain states. Like, oh, it gives an unfair advantage to like other states, or wage raises and stuff like that. And the only reason it changed is because he like failed to court up with people that agreed with him. But we see these Democrats and liberals being like, oh, the Supreme Court's democratic, but all they care about is the culture war, as long as it doesn't actually impact things like labor law, property rights, land treaties with the native people. I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg did the DAPL opposition vote. She also like voted against the Oneida Nations treaty that was broken in the 19th century in New York. So it's like they care about the Supreme Court as a culture war, moral value judgment versus like what's actually going to liberate working people from economic precarity. And history's shown it keeps getting worse, but it's like as long as we keep funding for gay marriage and like all these things, I'm like, I'd rather have Medicare for all than like gay marriage personally. Like, that's my personal viewpoint on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, it's not the reality, so it doesn't really matter.
I don't know if you've seen a little musical named Hamilton.
Don't get me started.
About how the beautiful foundation of this state was actually just a beautiful multicultural exercise. Sorry, if anybody has more to say about that, feel free.
Or we can go to.
However, I definitely want to throw another prompt out into the ether here, and if you pick it up or put it down, I don't care. So whatever. It's I don't know shit.
Inko Twink is calling you out for stealing their intellectual property. I'm just letting you know.
Wow.
Well, good.
Could we also just acknowledge real quick the comment about the person who had a grinder hookup fresh from work in his Disneyland park ranger uniform? I think you're being anti-worker for turning him away.
Excuse me. Yeah, I've just quick poll. Let's go around. Is it your obligation as a comrade to fuck the Disneyland park ranger worker? Yeah, I say yes.
You get them naked and then you can radicalize them. Like, people really want to talk about social issues.
That sounds like a yes. Esperanza, is that a yes from
While
you?
you're fucking, while
Yeah.
you're fucking.
Kumar says I would nut in him. I might apply to represent workers there again, so I probably shouldn't comment on this. But
No,
I'm
okay.
equal opportunity and pro worker.
Esperanza is pro worker. We'll leave it at that. Mila, is it your requirement as a comrade to bang the Disney park worker?
So I've literally never met one because I've never, I'm not American. We don't have that. But I guess it would depend on who they were.
Oh wait, sorry, no, wait. There is more detail coming to hand. Sorry,
Okay,
I'm getting up to breaking update. I asked him if he liked his job, and he said it was the best part of his life. Okay, no, never mind. No, okay, you're freed from your obligation. All right,
You need to agitate him.
Yeah, definitely a lot of education required there.
Can I lead into the next subject?
Yeah, please.
Cool. So leading to our second topic that we discussed earlier. Obviously of the RBG and Hamilton. So like I'm gonna call them the left, but we mean like the libs, because that's mostly what the left is in the US. Has this giant culture of kind of shitty, like woke
West Wing politics.
culture. It's their culture is like
West Wing politics.
is like Broadway musicals and like shitty like primetime television. But the left wing hasn't always been horrible on this cultural attitude. It's often actually had like a long, strong history of wanting things like folk music and enjoying the arts and stuff, which are all now viewed as like, ew, why would I go to the opera? That's disgusting. Like, I'm gonna go watch Gilmore Girls and blow my brains out.
Hey, Gilmore, nothing.
No, I know. It was the first thing I could think
We're
of.
all out of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of a show. It just came to my head. Let's think.
Grey's Anatomy.
Grey's Anatomy. There we go.
Yeah, we can always shit on that.
Sorry, just the first thing that came to my head. I have never actually seen Gilmore Girls.
Wow.
But I would love to know your thoughts
Know
on
me
like
before you hate me.
the role of like music and culture and like art to the left, and why you think the left is just either like completely ignorant around the topic of like importance to a cultural or to a social movement, or like why is it just really cringy? Like, go ahead, thoughts.
Yeah, I think I'm really into like media studies. I don't know. One of my favorite YouTubers is Lindsay Ellis. I don't know if any of you know who she is, but she does a lot of video essays about like Disney movies. I love watching that. Like there's one where she talks about she talks about Marxism in her videos sometimes, but there's a lot of history and a lot of she's got a really good one about like the Hobbit reboot with like they and she talks about like the workers' rights and stuff like that. You should definitely check out her channel. But in terms of like media and gosh, I don't even know where to start. Actually, what did I don't know. I'm a musician. I like make my own shit, and it's really cathartic to do that. But it's really important that we can experience these things together. Like people, like when they talk about Cuba, they're like, "Oh, there's only 3 channels in Cuba," but like they don't talk about like, "Oh, well, there's a lot of theater in Cuba. There's a lot of access to art."
Well, I mean, we really only have like look who controls the media here, and all of our news, our TV channels and shit. It's like 5 people,
right, and
but
like,
they're just like rebranded, so it's
Yeah.
like we don't like live in this like it's all concentrated.
There's a few good articles out there about how the Pentagon is in like gives Netflix like money and to make like war propaganda for them. Like a lot of these Marvel films have these like really hyper individualistic hero stories. It's just liberal trash. Like, I mean, I love watching it sometimes. I think that like the effects are really, really great, but like it's all shit.
Yeah. Well, I guess when we look at the socialist tradition in like either the US or abroad where a worker state was imposed, there was like mass transfers of cultural and artistic like entertainment and
Mhm.
ability to learn new skills like music and stuff like that.
Right.
While here it seems the image of making beautiful things and having beautiful like art and
Mhm.
shows and pageantries of many people doing things is viewed as like either like
Well-
fascistic or like
Yeah, they like there's every now and then I'll see
Eastern.
this video of like North Korean toddlers playing instruments and having a concert and like the comments are always like, oh, this is so creepy. And that's just so racist to me. I think it's amazing that a group of 4-year-olds can play the fucking guitar.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
I-
agree.
Absolutely.
It's the same with
And
that
they can
video.
do that together.
What'd you say?
Oh, it was the same thing that happened when there was a video of like Chinese kids playing basketball, and people were like, "Oh my God, this is so creepy." And I was thinking, it's really creepy that you would say that's creepy. They're just
Yeah.
kids
It's really,
learning coordination.
it's
Like
really
just because in your country you guys like get 2 minutes of physical activity per week, it doesn't mean that like all the other countries that try to make their kids active and cooperative are fascist. Like it's just mind-blowing to me.
Mhm.
Sorry, I had to jump in.
No, I absolutely agree with you because I mean, shouldn't you want to like let's take the national anthem for example. Like whenever we see that performed, it's always a soloist. It's never like a choir. My choir teacher was always like, the national anthem should never be sung as a solo. And he's got a point because I mean that like we should have us like songs that we all sing together that inspire solidarity. The national anthem doesn't inspire solidarity.
Well, actually, the national anthem was written by a socialist. Did you know that? A
Francis
socialist.
Key was
Yeah, they wrote the national anthem.
I didn't know that. No.
Yeah.
Well, ours is corny, so
Yeah, God save the Queen. Sorry.
Well, here, let me
No,
let
go
me
ahead.
let me throw it out. You know,
Go for it.
let me throw some lines at you.
Is there any more?
Arise, you workers, from your slumbers. Arise, you prisoners of want. No, if you're big Billy Bragg fans, never mind. All right.
But with this art and like leftist art and stuff, I think that in general it's very hard to make political art that's not tacky. Like I can't really think of a lot of artists who do political stuff that's not tacky. And that goes with both the left and the right and with liberals. Like I like all these like rappers that make raps in favor of Trump or the ones that do it against, like it's just tiring to me.
We love our cops, our law enforcement.
Well, it's like aesthetics in general. It's like aesthetics in general for like certain political movements. I mean, I think we can look at the Black Panthers, like the black berets and like their outfits. It's like they look slick, they look good, like they look serious. And now we have like liberal women doing like the pink pussy hats and like screaming outside when Trump's being elected. It's like one looked cool and sleek and professional. Another seems like just kind of like, I don't know. It doesn't seem very serious to me. Like,
well,
Yeah.
I mean, could I throw a few suggestions out there in terms of, I feel like one of the funny things though, I have a friend who kind of was a polite left lib for a very long time, and recently through another friend of ours kind of ended up like tank pilled in a pretty big way. And one of the things he kind of ran into though is kind of some of the despair of it all. And one of the interesting things was I was like, he's a musician, so you know, definitely I was like, what is the language you use to pick somebody up off that floor? What do you do when you sort of realize the full fucking horror of the world, and that all these wonderful bromides that you've fallen back on, you know, just caring about Ruth Bader Ginsburg's clapbacks or whatever, like that when that's not doing, it's not doing the heavy lifting for you anymore. And one of the things I always go back to is music.
Mm-hmm.
And that there's a wonderful kind of, radical folk tradition in the US. I mean, Phil Oakes, big fan personally. Go back for Paul Robeson. If you're not familiar with him, he's really worth doing. And then for a Brit, Billy Bragg. I'm a big fan personally. And there's a whole fucking internecine dispute about which version of the Internationale you should sing. Is it because Billy Bragg wrote alternate lyrics, which I personally think are better. They're more for our time, and they were written about 1988, 89, and yet they kind of prefigure a lot of the interesting disputes of our time. There's lines like, something, don't let them build walls to divide us, walls of hatred or walls of stone. See, look, libs can even get behind that shit. Right. So anyway,
how dare you?
Any musical recommendations for what do you your radical traditions? What picks you up off the floor? Is it Pete Seeger? Is it Lady Gaga?
So I really, really love this Tunisian artist. Her name is Emma Mathlouthi, and a lot of her songs they were like revolutionary anthems. I've been listening to a lot of her stuff. And she's really, really lovely. She's a really, really sweet lady. So that's something that, like, her music has been really inspirational for me lately.
You draw some strength from. Mila, you're a musician. Where do you draw your political strength from musically?
Okay, so I like I said, it's really hard for me to like take a lot of political music seriously, but I've really admired a lot of Kendrick's stuff.
Cool.
Like Kendrick Lamar.
You're on first name basis.
Well, I just but I mean, I think that a lot of his stuff is really real, and he has this song called High Power, and I thought like that song to me is one of my favorite political tracks because it shows him kind of struggling with the more like respectable ways of being like of dealing with your circumstances versus like the radical stuff when he starts citing like Black Panthers and like Huey Newton and how you can't resist like their power. And there's a line in it, and I remember the first time I heard it was years ago. I wasn't even like super political, but he had a line that was like, "Sorry, mama, I can't turn the other cheek. They want to knock me off the edge." And like that to me was really powerful. So that, and I also really like Joey Badass. He has an album called All American Badass, and then there's like some good political tracks on there. But I find a lot of stuff is really tacky. I've tried to like I used to really like Rage Against the Machine, but they haven't really aged that well for me.
Green Day's American Idiot.
Yeah, okay. I have so much to say. So when I was in fifth grade, that was the first time I became political, because my family was talking about the Iraq War a lot. And so I was like, yeah, Bush is the devil, whatever. And then that song, that was the first concert I went to. And I was a big Green Day fan, and I was also a really big fan of Anti-Flag when I was like 10 or 11.
Nice.
Their song about the Iraq War, $1 trillion. But who I've been really liking, even though sometimes I think the lyrics are a bit tacky, is Serj Tankian. Like his solo stuff.
Sometimes New Zealand resident now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think he naturalized in New Zealand.
Yeah. Okay. Well, he has this really powerful song about the Armenian genocide. And it's not even in English, but like you can still feel the pure emotion. I think the song's called Yes, It's Genocide. And I really recommend. I think that's the most powerful political track that
I'll second Serj Tankian. Right.
Yeah.
Esperanza, any musical
cultural
artistic touchstones for you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really listen to political music, I guess because I haven't found any that's like really authentic. I don't know, like even like, you know, Lil Baby, like his new song about police brutality, it's all about, you know, the pigs and the people, you know, making peace with each other. And I think that's just a result of like music produced on the market is not going to be
Have a
produced,
Pepsi.
yeah, like solely for, you know, political statement, especially a political statement that is, you know, very like contrarian. So I don't know. I like to listen to music that resonates with like my life experience and, you know, the things that I went through. And to me, that's political because it talks about what those of us on the bottom have lived through, how we've survived. But I don't think that like the political message in music that intends to do that is very, very powerful.
Interesting. There's as I think there's a few kind of interesting examples of like I was just trying to think of what's his name fuck, I don't remember his pseudonym. This Is America. What's his name?
Oh,
Childish Gambino.
Nobody got it. Childish Gambino. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's one of these songs where like it's the song fucking sucks.
Well, he also endorsed Pete Buttigieg.
No, exactly. No, and that's the thing is there's so much to like
He
or
did?
respect.
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. No, exactly. There's so much to respect about the message and the passion, but the song itself fucking sucks. And then I was thinking you kind of go back a little further, and you know, local boy done good, Boots Riley and the Coup.
Yeah,
Amazing.
Bruce Riley is really good.
We always give Boots credit. And then even going back further, I think there's things like Grandmaster Flash, The Message, right? These are like, this is sort of stuff which to me, I'm like, this is radicalism that doesn't have to be musically fucking inane.
Yeah.
Like what a fantastic track.
Well, I feel like so much of mass-produced culture is centralized, like Eric said earlier, to like such a few corporations where all this is basically destroyed before it can start, when not like only like 30, 40 years ago, like you had many folk singers and stuff talking about working class issues or singing about Mao versus Chiang Kai-shek or whatever. Like the only filmography or like cultural piece I think that's actually even addressed labor working issues well is like Boots Riley's film Sorry to Bother You. It's so like good. Hilarious, it's well done, but also highlights like all the issues with capitalism in a way that's like understandable to anyone. If you guys haven't seen it, it's fucking hilarious.
It's so really great.
Yeah. River
that film gave me mad anxiety.
River.
Oh my god. River didn't drown in hurricanes. Susie, Sally,
Jane.
what was her name?
Sally, stupid bitch.
Stupid bitch, Sally. Fuck.
Yeah. My apartment was flooded, so all of my, this is like the only clean section of my house. I'm trying to like clean it in sections. There's not like water anymore, but yeah, it sucks. First, like, I mean, it's almost like God is punishing me for sodomy or something, because there's like
being named River. Come on.
Well, yeah.
What was going to happen to your house?
Well, like it came in like, it was like plagues. Like first there were frogs. Like I shit you not. Like there's just
serious?
Yes. The way we found out. Yeah, like the only reason that more of our stuff didn't get like destroyed is because my boyfriend Chris like heard like a frog inside the house, and he's like, how the fuck is there a frog inside the house? And so like got up and like stepped out of the bed and just like stepped into water, and he was like, oh shit. He was like, get up. And so we just had to like throw all of our stuff like on the bed and on the couch, and like it was crazy.
Well, River, just to catch you up on the conversation, we were sort of talking about you know, the cultural projects that you draw strength, inspiration, or just enjoyment from, music, art, Broadway productions or Broadway reproductions of the Founding Fathers. What is it? You have anything you enjoy?
So I think that I mean, obviously, I think that the most like political, like mainstream-ish artists that I can think of, like explicitly political, like consistently, besides like Boots Riley, or I guess like Rage Against the Machine kind of, would be like MIA, who was doing that whole like terrorist chic thing in like 2007 or whatever, which was like
she started hanging out with Silicon Valley billionaires on the reg.
yeah, she kind of got like swept up in the whole tech thing, but she was always like very anti-war, and like I don't know, like I kind of respect somebody who like was temporarily banned from the United States. Like, I mean, I'm kind of like, okay,
wow,
well,
half-assing it, get a permanent ban, like a real.
yeah, for having like the Tamil Tigers logo on her first album cover or whatever, like just like such a troll. It's so cool. I think that like the most political but least consciously political or whatever would probably be like, I don't know, Lana Del Rey, who's just like constantly called a reactionary despite like openly like not giving a shit about politics. And I think that's interesting because like she's just sad and she just wants a boyfriend, and then people are attacking her. And I'm like, I feel like that's very relatable to me.
She wants that dick.
Girls love Lana. Like I don't all the girls I know, we all love Lana Del Rey. I don't trust people that don't. It's
I don't either.
She's amazing.
I'm like, you have
also the chat. Whoever wrote about Azalea Banks, I love her.
Me too.
I don't care what she does.
Thank goodness.
Did you guys hear her
I
interview?
quoted her in one of my articles.
She went on the podcast True and Not and talked about like like literally like the one of the most concise like prison pipeline explanations, like in a way that anyone understands. It was like, holy fuck, like maybe you're crazy as shit, but like you did better explanation of this than like every other person in Congress. Like
Comrade Azalea.
I love Azalea Banks. I don't think she's done anything wrong. Azalea Banks can spit on me and call me a fag.
I'm critical support for Azalea.
Yeah. I really like Tupac. Tupac is really good.
Nice.
There's also Rebel Diaz is really good. I don't know if any of you have heard of Rebel Diaz. They're a hip hop group from Chicago, but they're also from Chile. And they're really revolutionary. Their stuff is really good. And like other just like I am very basic with my music. Otherwise, I'm a big Angels and Airwaves fan. So I'm still like in high school. Wait, do you listen to Cupcake?
I don't know. I love Cupcake.
She's got some like nasty songs.
Yeah,
a lot of really like I love her nasty shit, but like she also makes me cry, and because some of her stuff is like just really political and just really real. She's got this one line about like living off of ramen, like and I was just in an Uber once and I started crying. I was like, Cupcake is making me so sad. Like it felt relatable, and she's from Chicago.
And then Low-Key is really good.
I am
Low-Key. The rapper from.
But some stuff is a bit corny, I feel like.
All political music is corny. I think you covered that point well.
Yeah, but like Low-Key, I mean, I like him a lot as like a human. But I do feel like a lot of political music, I'm like, yeah, dude, like.
Like not a lot of her stuff is political, but she's very political.
Oh yeah.
And I don't think that you need to like, directly make music that speaks to suffering and or that calls out like capitalism or anything. But like she shows up to demonstrations and she speaks about issues and stuff. And I don't know. What?
Cupcake.
Oh no, Janelle Monáe.
Oh, Janelle Monáe.
She's great.
Yeah,
I don't know why people stand her.
I saw Janelle Monáe at Oakland Pride.
she sang a duet with Prince, and I will never stop loving her just for that.
I want to know where Nelly Furtado is. Where is she?
Yeah.
She's like a bird. She only flies away. But like, were there follow-up questions that were not answered in the song?
She was too promiscuous, so she flew away like a bird.
Can we just talk about like Comrade Britney and
poor Britney.
free Britney,
Free her, yeah.
but also work, bitch. You know.
So I my only sort of it's funny the reflection about most political music being cringe. I completely agree, and one of my like teenage loves was a Welsh band from like a dead mining town called the Manic Street Preachers, and they I just fucking loved them. Put it this way, I loved them the entire time, and they started off with a political radicalism. What I loved about them is every time anybody got close to what their politics were, they would do something just completely shitty to like subvert it. So there's a great interview where they are the photographer took I guess a photo of them at Karl Marx's grave, because they have a lot of socialist, explicitly socialist content in their music. And then so they took a thing, and then they went and played a concert in Cuba. It was the first sort of Western rock band to go play in Cuba. And then they gave an interview where they're like, we don't really believe in any of this at all. Just as a total troll, and I just fucking love that. I love that.
Great. They're so great. I wish they did more music in Welsh, because I'm Welsh, and and I love Welsh music. Fun fact, all of you love at least one Welsh song, and it's called Deck the Halls. It is a Welsh movie. You're welcome.
Period.
Period.
You also all are required to love one German song, O Tannenbaum.
Yeah.
The people's flag over the red flag.
Should we start our last topic so we can get to the last hour for questions?
Yeah. So what we're gonna do? Everybody get their questions ready. Charge their
at 8 o'clock East or Pacific Standard Time.
I have to. May I address one controversial point?
Yeah, do it. Slut.
Well, yes. Wrong one. Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry. That was good too. We all support Welsh sovereignty. Didn't lead singer Manic Street Preachers recently get a monster mag? No. Lead singer Massive Attack. Just to be clear, and it's still controversial, but it's probably Massive Attack.
Okay. So. Okay. Leading into
what do you got, Sam?
So we touched on this in our first ever More Marxist Than You Can Handle, but obviously this is a hot topic right now of kind of the security state under a capitalist state, and how do we as Marxists address it? So this means like the prisons, the police, the borders. I mean, recently there was the big expose of mass forced hysterectomies of people in the concentration camps under IS. So it's like, how do we, I guess we can go for everyone, and kind of like, what is your viewpoint on these structures, and what do you think is the way to combat them as Marxists? I mean, should we start with Esperanza? Do you want to go first, or?
Yeah, start anywhere you want.
Yeah. So I have like very my opinion on this goes sort of up and down, but I think that's because it's like sort of dialectical. But I think, on one hand, a lot of abolitionists are very idealist, right? Like they think that you could just sort of abolish the police. Can you not snap, please? Sorry, my friend is snapping and it's making me anxious. Sorry, but they think that you could just like abolish the police by, I don't know, like defunding them or just, marching in the streets. And I don't think that's possible, right? And I also think that like a lot of abolitionists use like carceral versus non-carceral to judge everything throughout history. So for example, because we're supposed to be abolitionists, anything that resembles like, the carceral state has to be denounced. So, you have people denouncing like Mao, Stalin, all of these great leaders. yes, I think they're great leaders.
Daddy.
Yes, they are.
Cancel.
Daddy.
But at the same time, I don't think that there is going to be a solution to American police without some sort of abolition. And the reason why I say this is because, even if we, take power, establish a worker state, of course, we're going to need our own mechanisms of repression to repress, the bourgeoisie, domestic white nationalist terrorists. But that will need to be something new. And the reason why is because when you look at police as they are now, the way that they've been trained, the way that they've been socialized, is not something that I think we could ever work with. I think that they all need to be fired, and we need to start a new agency for public safety. I'm from Los Angeles, and in LA, we've known for a very long time that the police are in gangs. Like, that's just something that we know. It's a fact of life. And recently, a deputy, along with some other officers, came forward to expose these gangs that run really deep and that reward officers for killing people. So I do think that, we are going to need to completely smash it. Kind of like Lenin says in State and Revolution, like the bourgeois state needs to be smashed, but then we need to create a worker state. And I see it the same way with, police.
Esperanza, do you would you like to perhaps draw a contrast there? Because I feel like the smash the state rhetoric is employed by a variety of edgy teens and anarchists, but you mean it in a very specific way, don't you?
Yeah, so I don't mean that we think we could just suddenly end the state and not have anything and we're going to be okay, know? No, I think that we need to smash the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, and create a worker state, that can eventually transition us to communism or to the second stage of communism. But I don't think we're going to do that by, thinking we're going to be safe with the lackeys of the bourgeoisie, which are the police, right? I think we're going to need workers armed as themselves to protect us.
So, I mean, there's a lot of sort of very heated rhetoric around, say, being a police abolitionist these days versus a defund camp. And then there was a pre-existing, obviously, sort of prison abolition movement. Do you sort of tie your struggles to any of those movements, or are you sort of charting your own course with your beautiful razor-sharp dialectics, or where do you see yourself in that struggle?
No, I think that the uprising against the police is a class struggle uprising, although there are people trying to co-opt it. And I think that if you're a Marxist, a socialist, a communist, whatever, and you're not learning from the masses in their uprising against the police, then you're silly, right? Or just simply ineffective. I think that we need to connect our movement to the most popular movement right now, which is against the police. And I also think that, as socialists, the DSA just sort of jumped on it and was like, defund the police. I don't think that's what you do. I think we, as a Maoist, I believe in the mass line. So I think we learn from the masses, we listen to what they want, but then we synthesize it and then put it back out there. So with the whole, problems with the police, we need to understand that the police and the people are a contradiction, but they're not the primary contradiction. The primary contradiction is between labor and capital, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. And so we need to be able to explain in a really popular way that the masses can really grab and take hold of, that if you don't like the way police are killing your family, killing your friends, pulling you over, harassing you, we need to solve the primary contradiction, which is the police exist as a tool of repression to maintain power for the dominant class and to repress us. And I think when we do that and call attention to the primary contradiction, we can sort of take that energy and redirect it where it belongs.
God, yeah. Class reductionism, just Esperanza knows no bounds.
We stand.
Why you think the primary contradiction? God, way to ignore.
River is next.
Oh yeah, River's just he's getting his shit together.
Okay.
Hey River, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm cooking beans. It's like the only food that I have that I didn't have to throw away because my fridge was out for so long. Yeah, so I with regards to the police, I'm very as Esperanza said, like suspicious of this, just jumping on the whole like defund the police thing. I think that the way that people are going about this is very alienating, because like it's not that most people like the police. Like I grew up, like my parents were just like rednecks from East Texas, and they call like the cops like pigs, and like I mean, like if you like there's like if I get on like Facebook, which I rarely do anymore, like people, I'll just still see people I went to high school with being like, there's a pig on Highway 69, watch out. Like, like they hate cops. But like, I mean, the whole, rhetoric of just like, people do not like the idea of like complete anarchy. And, I don't really either. I mean, people have a right to ask like, well, what's going to happen? Like if somebody tries to rape me, or if somebody murders my child, or, like all of that, like people have a right to ask those questions. And if you don't have an answer for them, or if you're just going to be like, oh, well, we'll just get your rapist a social worker, like people are going to be like, no, fuck you, like that's, so, I mean, I don't really know how you would address this problem. The police unions are a big problem. The contracts that allow the police to basically act with impunity. I get very nervous when especially liberals start talking about police unions, because like there's not a single doubt in my mind that like attacking police unions is going to be like they will squeeze in a way to attack all public sector unions. Like, they'll write the law and bill it as like, well, we're going to break up the police unions, but then they'll also break up like the garbage man unions and like the DMV employee union and the teachers union or whatever. Yeah. And so that concerns me. With regards to the situation on the border, I mean, there's no reason that we should have people locked up the way that we do. I'm not an open borders type of person. I don't think like open borders in like a capitalist society, like that's just going to lead to more exploitation. And I mean, the old left sort of line was that, labor scarcity is labor power. And I do think that's true. I mean, like, it's not, people just pretend that like, oh, like Americans, like native born Americans won't like work on a farm, like picking strawberries or whatever, but like they will if you pay them enough. Right. I mean, that's sort of a lie that everybody's been sold, that like, oh, well, there's just all these jobs that could actually pay well, like jobs in like slaughterhouses could pay well, but the corporations have like explicitly advertised in like Mexico and like parts of Central America, like basically like come here, work, and then they do, and then we deport them. And it's like, well, I think you need to go to the source. You need to go to like, you need to punish the employers that are like hiring these people to work at like extremely low wages, but like you shouldn't be locking people up on the border. Like if people have an asylum case pending, they should be able to get like an ankle monitor and like come back. I mean, I feel like that works pretty well in places where they've like ended a lot of like cash bail and stuff. And I think that we need, I mean, as the country that created a lot of the social problems that is driving this migration, we need to do a part in like rebuilding those societies. Like there's a reason that, I mean, because it isn't mostly immigration from Mexico anymore, which, by the way, that wave of immigration was caused by NAFTA and the destruction of the agricultural economy in southern Mexico, because they couldn't compete with like cheap subsidized U.S. corn mostly. But like the, you know, massive like political and economic instability in Central America is caused by the United States funding death squads there in the 80s and 90s. And so, yeah, we should probably do something about that. I think Bernie Sanders, when he had like the sort of like a Marshall Plan for Central America, like I think that was, you know, probably a good place to start.
Let me let Esperanza jump in on a listener question.
Yeah, so just really quickly wanted to respond to this. I don't for a second believe the masses support police. I think the masses support public safety, and they don't support anarchy, and they don't support taking away the only institution that so-called guarantees our public safety from them without replacing it or, you know, giving them something that can guarantee their public safety. But, you know, when you go out into the masses, into working class communities, like where I came from, people hate the police. I mean, they hate the police. You know, even organized labor, you know, what happens when they go out on strike? What happens when they have a picket line? Who's the first point of oppression? It's the police, right? The immigrant masses, the masses of migrant workers, they're afraid of the police and they hate them. But we are co-embedded in a system where, for me as a trans woman, if I get attacked by someone, I'm going to call the police. There's a chance, very likely chance, that they're going to victim blame me, possibly harass me. You know, I've had police scream at me, but right now they're the only thing that we have. And so I would argue the masses support public safety, but not police in particular. And I also don't trust polling numbers. And I think any of us who are involved, even marginally, with the Bernie campaign should understand why. The methodology for, you know, polling is often skews white, often skews older. You know, a lot of polls only would call, like, you know, landlines when most people don't even have landlines nowadays. So, you know, I don't consider sort of polling to be like the end all be all of empirical data. And I do think people support public safety, not anarchy, but I don't think that means they necessarily support the police.
Yeah. I have there's a funny thing, a fun New Zealand anecdote. They say, and this might be in other places as well, but what was always shocking to me in New Zealand is if you're driving and there's a police car parked somewhere to like as a speed trap, people for miles around will flash their lights at you to warn you that there's a cop. So maybe, you know, slow down a little, you know, whatever. Maybe take a side road if your car is not quite up to spec.
Yeah, we do that. Yeah.
Oh, you guys do that too? Yeah, no, I assumed it was a thing. Okay, good. You know, see, the thing is, and that to me, that's like, isn't that a universal sign that this is, put it this way, it's not just, you know, shitty cars flashing lights. This is even your you know, late model Audis are still flashing their lights because there is a widely held view that it turns out it's us against them. People, I think it's a wonderful point, Esperanza, about, you know, the difference between public safety versus the police as an institution.
Can I say something real quick?
Please.
So I think that one like problem that you're going to have, and like I remember this when I went to a BLM protest here after the George Floyd murder, and there was also a police murder of Tamar Crawford, who was just this guy in Pensacola who was just like smoking, like they said that he smelled weed on him or whatever, and like pulled him over at this house and then like shot him on his front porch. It was grotesque. But I was at a protest for that, and I mean there were a lot of people there, like including like Black people who were like, we don't hate the police. Like I have family who are police, and you know, whatever. And I think that is a big part of it too, that people often don't realize, especially if you're from like a working or like lower middle class sort of background, like that is where most police come from. It's sort of the same problem with the military, is like it will give you like a stable-ish, like, you know, source of income, it's fairly easy to
one of the few strong public sector unions left.
Right. And so, like, I mean, there's a lot of people like within the sort of working class or like lower middle class, whatever, who like maybe are not, you know, or still flash their lights at you to warn you that there's a cop up ahead or whatever, or maybe even have like a negative view of police overall. But when people like attack, like say we need to defund the police, get rid of the police, I think that sort of like hits them. They're like, oh, I don't want my uncle to lose this job or whatever. Or like they don't believe that all like police are like necessarily like evil people because they know them in like a personal capacity.
Mila, what do you jump in?
Yeah. Okay, well, I have like a few layers to this question. But I would like to first of all, I'm not American, so I can't speak to the
Canadian police are perfect, right?
Police. No, our police have a different history. So whereas the American police had their founding kind of embedded with slavery, ours had a very colonial founding that pertained to essentially separating Indigenous children from their parents and putting them in residential schools. So we have a dark history. It's just different.
We don't have any dark history of that in the U.S.
No, I'm like you have that too, but I'm just saying the inception.
I'm joshing.
But what I wanted to start with was actually the border question, and on the left, when it comes to discussing borders, whether you're open borders or not open borders, I personally view myself as somewhere closer to the open borders view, but from a leftist perspective, and I don't view myself as fully pro open borders. I don't think that, first of all, a rule about borders can be applied the same to every country because each country has different capacities. But what has bothered me about leftist discourse on borders is that we have completely neglected to factor in imperialism into the question. So these migrant crises that are happening as a direct result of foreign policy, whether that is through funding Islamist terrorists in Syria, whether it is through completely disseminating and destroying Libya and Iraq. These crises all come from a direct result of imperialism. So I don't think that we can even talk about closing the borders at all. Not that they're not open, but I don't think we can reasonably talk about a more restrictive perspective until we deal with our foreign policies. So I think that countries like Canada and the US that are complicit in creating migrant crises have a greater responsibility towards immigrants and towards refugees than, say, countries that actually carry the highest burden for refugees. Lebanon takes in some of the highest amount of refugees in the world, and they're completely unequipped for it. So in Lebanon, for instance, open borders might not be as sustainable as it is in Canada, where in Canada we're actually kind of underpopulated. So I think, again, you can't apply the same framework to every single country. I do think, however, that where the left critique is correct of open borders, for instance, I didn't understand why everyone piled on Angela Nagel. Like I think like what she said made complete sense.
That's right.
In the sense that, yes, there is a problem of exploitation. So for instance, it creates more competition in the labor market. And I mean, River basically said this very quite eloquently, so I don't need to repeat it. But that is a genuine problem. Where I see this is now, I'm just gonna say, yeah, Lenin was right again for like the 17th time. But but his point was that imperialism ends up having the effect of pitting the world's working classes against each other, and I think that's what this is doing, because we engage in these imperial projects. We create a migrant crisis where people, and these are people who are suffering greatly. A lot of these people that come are religious minorities who are being forced to either convert to Islam or die. So like for us to say, okay, well, I know that you have it bad, but you're going to get exploited if you come here. So we're going to just turn you back to ISIS. I don't think that that's good. And I don't think that like their right to life and the right to life of like a worker in the US should be competing with each other. I think that they're essentially on the same team and they're oppressed by the same forces. And so I think that before even addressing the immigration debate, we need to address imperialism. And to address imperialism, you need to address capitalism. So again, it's going to sound class reductionist, but like what the root is. And so there's that. When it comes to policing, I think that, you know, if we swiftly abolish the police, we're just going to end up with the McPolice or the Amazon police. So obviously, we don't want that.
P.F. Chang's police.
P.F. Chang, I don't know what that is, but I assume it's
a restaurant chain. It's upscale police.
It's shitty Chinese food.
Yeah, upscale, shitty West Coast Chinese food.
Kidding. So, I mean, when it comes to policing here, where I do agree with some of the defunding discourse is I think that there's some things that are in the police job description that don't need to be. So I actually do see it. Some of it is even taking a burden off of police because you don't need to enforce drug laws. And like there are laws that basically add more to the job description of police that end up disproportionately impacting the working class, Indigenous people, Black people, etc. So, you know, we'll get a Tim Hortons PD, but maybe if, you know, you take some things out of the job description, like vice or like just general like drug policing, that's already a way to reallocate funds into, like in BC, we're trying to have safe injection sites and we're trying to help people that are impacted by addiction. We need more funding there and maybe less funding in criminalizing drug addicts. So that's, you know, where I do see the a reasonable way to like move around some funding. When it comes to fully abolishing, I just don't see it happening under capitalism. Well, I just think that, you know, if we do it now, what's going to happen is everyone who has the money is going to hire their own police officers. And these police officers are actually less accountable because whereas now the ones we have are technically on our payroll and they're technically democratically accountable to us, private police are not at all. Look at like the conduct of some bouncers, for instance. Like you're going to get that times 20. And so basically you're just going to end up, everyone who has money is going to have their own private police. And I also agree with River that it's going to end up with some sort of austerity politics and anti-union politics that just kind of digs at the public sector generally. So I think it's better to keep them public employees rather than private. But I do think eventually in establishing socialism, the nature of policing might change because the nature of the criminal would change. So under capitalism, the criminal, the archetypal criminal is typically working class, Black, Indigenous, whatever. In communist countries, the typical criminal is a capitalist. It's a financial criminal. People go to jail for exploiting people. When the nature of the criminal changes, so would the nature of policing. So I guess my answer for policing and borders is kind of the same, in the sense that we need to address the root, which is capitalism and imperialism. And before we addressing it without that is always going to leave something missing in the conversation.
Yeah.
I would, well, Eric just ducked out. I was going to go to Eric, but Fox, you're still here.
Yeah.
Fox, what do you think, dear?
Go, girl.
So I have a lot. I have a lot to say and add to all of the wonderful things that have been said that I agree with. But in Chicago, I do a lot of work with around police abolition. I support we have a group in Chicago called the Chicago Alliance Against Racism and Policing, and they their whole thing is CPAC, which is legislation that would create Community Police Accountability Council. And so kind of piggybacking off of what Mila said about changing the nature of who's a criminal, we have to, as a culture and a society, change the way that we interact with other people. In an individualistic society, like the stranger and the unknown is your enemy. And so when you're afraid, you call the police. We have to stop doing that. But we've mentioned Hamilton a couple of times, and I think, like, if anything is class reductionist, it's fucking Hamilton, because Thomas Jefferson was pretty, even though he was a slave owner, he was pretty explicit in trying to write into our Constitution the abolition of slavery. And it didn't work. Even when they abolished slavery, the 13th Amendment says slavery is abolished only unless it serves as punishment for a crime. And so we have to, I mean, it's going to take an overhaul of our Constitution and like a really, really radical change. And it's not just about getting rid of the police. It's about reallocating a lot of the job that a cop does, because a lot of communities and a lot of cities, their entire economy is based off of putting people in jail for labor. And it's really important that we stop doing that. We have to stop doing that. I mean, it's literally slavery. Policing is slave catching. End of story. And we don't have any way to hold these people accountable. When you call the police on someone, you're putting them at risk to become a slave. And but people, I think, mistake abolishing police and policing as like anarchy and lawlessness, and kind of like what Esperanza was saying earlier, that, you know, when you are in danger, you do need someone to call. And we should have that. We should have an institution of public safety. They should sit in an office until they're called, like firefighters. Firefighters don't go around chasing fires, right? Like, you call them, and then they show up.
Slide down poles, which I think we are all in favor of.
I love firefighters.
Yeah, firefighters, hot.
And
Daddy.
Wow. You know, I also wanted to address one of the comments, which asked about like what the alternative is, and just some of the things that were brought up. But one is just that, like, as someone who comes from, you know, an immigrant family, one thing I want to say about the whole, you know, like, I forgot what the quote you used, River, but about like when there's more labor, there's sort of like
Labor
less competition or less labor power.
Scarcity is labor power.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to say is that that is not about migration. That's about capitalism. And the reason why is because we could close all of our borders down, and the reserve army of unemployed workers is already used to take away labor power, right? So it's not the result of like immigration, because that's the reason why unemployment exists in such high numbers, right? Is to give the capitalists more power to drive down wages, drive down labor law, you know, worker protections, etc. You know, but the second thing I just wanted to add is that, you know, I am not for like this sort of anarchist idea that we're going to,
Right.
suddenly abolish the police and we're all just going to sit in these little circles, right? And like do transformative justice. I don't think transformative justice works. However, I think that, anyone who does not believe that the police are racist, I'm going to challenge you because I don't think you've really had enough experience with the police or with
Esperanza,
people.
can I push you to clarify? Only to say, because this is getting back to sort of what people are talking about. Everybody knows a nice cop, right? Their uncle, their fucking dad, their neighborhood guy, their dare session, who they're like, well, they're not personally racist. Yeah. What does it mean to say the police are racist?
So I mean, one, I don't think the police are just racist. I think they're a lot more than racist, right? But when we say that the police are racist, it's because they're enforcing a racist system, right? Like they're enforcing the law of a settler colonial capitalist state that was founded on genocide and slavery. How can they not be racist? I mean, and the whole thing about rape and this and that, I mean, as someone who's been raped, I've never reported it to police. And I'm not the only woman who's not done that. I mean, the police do not solve rape in the majority of cases, right? Like they do not provide safety. We need public safety, but the police aren't giving it to us. And so in terms of like what alternatives are, I really like this idea of community control over the police. Now, I know that is sort of critiqued among, the abolition world, and possibly for good reason, because, for example, in Los Angeles, they won a civilian oversight board that has no teeth and did nothing. But I was listening to this one Black Marxist talk about community control over public safety. And I like that slogan because it's like we need to envision public safety in a new way. The community needs to have complete control over it. We do need to completely destroy police unions. As someone who's been a union organizer for the past, 7 years now, I'm sorry, no. Unions, we're going to have to learn how to organize and how to fight. And we're going to have to say, police unions defend the very people that kill our workers, that break our strikes, that harm us. And we have to protect our unions while destroying theirs. And I don't think that's going to weaken our unions, right? That will only make our unions stronger.
I'm gonna have a spicy take on that, but sorry.
Yeah, but I think community control over public safety. And I think that the police that are currently here, the majority, if not every single one of them, needs to go because they're reactionary. I mean, let's be honest, they are reactionary. How many police rape and assault the women that they have in their car? How many police have been proven to profile and kill Black and brown people over white people? I mean, they're literally, they exist to criminalize poverty. And so I don't think that those people can be saved. I think a lot of police, my mom dated a cop for a second. My sister threw a donut in his face. Love my sister. But let's just be honest. A lot of them are reactionary.
Sister.
They become police because they want to have power over people. Yeah. We need people who want to become public safety officers because they want to protect people, and not any people, but our people, the proletariat, the workers, the immigrants, etc.
So I want to let the red list jump in. I just did want to ask quickly to clarify. I mean, when you say sort of local control, I mean, for example, would that mean say the mayor or the city councilors having power to get rid of individual cops, or what does that mean to you?
So I mean based off of the proposal initiated by Amiri Baraka and Bobby Seale about community control over the police, where there is a community control board made up of members of the community, workers, not bosses, not capitalists, not government agencies, but the community. And they have full control to hire and fire the police. And that's what I mean by community control.
Cool, thanks. Oh, sorry. I just want to let Eric and Fox jump in. I know you had a point on this.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think everything that was just said is absolutely right. Esperanza said it perfectly throughout this whole entire discussion. I think everyone else did too. The only thing I would like to add is we have to start looking at police as an occupational force. They're not workers. They are here to repress the masses, which are the proletariat, the working class people, especially people who are indigenous and black. They are that's what they do. They go around and put them in labor camps to benefit capitalists. They're there to wage class war on behalf of the capitalist class and lock everybody up for profit. And there's also a foreign policy part in this. And we had an interview with David Yoon about this and discussing how our military forces, our police forces also train with, Israel, and they share techniques on repressing people who are under the occupation. And they bring that home and they do that to us here. So there's this whole big connection to that.
Yeah, something David said in the interview that we did with him was that when Koreans were fighting the capitalists to get them out of their country after the peninsula voted to for their left-wing government, the American military ordered the Korean army, to shoot the demonstrators, and they wouldn't do it. So they started moving. Since the America now has control over the military in the south of the peninsula, they train soldiers and then they moved them to new places because they're more likely to kill those people that they don't know. And so that's why police here don't police their neighborhoods. They police other neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So a famous story from 1917 of the Cossacks basically refusing to attack the workers instead of attacking the police in St. Petersburg, and was kind of key to the revolution. Sorry, Sam, you jump in there.
Cool. So I'm going to split the borders topic from the police and prisons. I think they're two different subjects in general in regards to security. So when it comes to borders, I think there's kind of 4 different groups of immigration that people need to kind of address. I think the open borders convo so often just lumps in everyone coming into a country as the same. But when you look into immigration, at least in the US, you have refugees who I think every refugee should be given access to the US, often because they are victims of imperialist action. So I'm not going to go too deep into that. But then you have the guest worker programs. You have the people from the Philippines and Latin America who are basically like human trafficked to work in the farm fields, or as charter school teachers or daycare workers or nannies. And it's like, to me, that's basically a manifestation of modern day slavery. And I think we need to end all of those programs because these workers are bound to that particular job, often through manipulation, through fraud, and capital exploitation. And I think that should be illegal. I think they should, for one, if they are coming here, be paid the full rights and not be denied the ability to opt out without severe punishment, which is not the case for most of these workers. And then you have upscale workers, the ones who basically contribute to brain drain.
So you're like H-1Bs, right?
Yeah. These are the workers who work in Silicon Valley at the medical field. There's more doctors from Ethiopia in the US than there's in Ethiopia, even though the country of Ethiopia paid for all these people to get educated. And this is a common tool for Western capitalist states to steal the publicly educated populations from either East Germany, it's China, the Eastern Bloc, Russia. And to me, I don't think we should be letting them in.
New Zealand.
I think it allows for many countries and capitalist states to deny people the right to a higher education because we can steal it from capital or for socialist and communist states. And then lastly, we take in all of the bourgeois classes from Venezuela and China and
These are your,
former Soviet
your
Union.
investor visas, O1s, like all these wild visa classes that are for like, oh, you're too rich to really go through the normal immigration system. Let us roll out the red carpet.
So I think when it comes to the highly educated classes of immigrants and the bourgeois class trying to get safety in the U.S., I don't think we should give them any visas.
But wow, you would deny the Shah of healthcare? Wow.
But I think when it comes to like low-skilled labor and refugees for sure, and low-skilled labor, I don't think the state should ever have a role in persecuting them, but instead it should be persecution of the capitalist class who's exploiting undocumented labor and denying labor rights. They should go to jail. Like, my view when it comes to police in jail is the police in jail under a capitalist state is always there to perpetuate the class of capitalism. They're never here for us. But whatever we can win under the system, it should be used against the capitalist class. So I think or CEOs who exploit undocumented or low-wage labor, jail. Pimps, I think pimps should go to jail. Like, I know
wow, carceral state.
I know Esperanza gets a lot of shit like, oh, you're a carceral. I'm like, I think pimps should go to jail. I think you're an awful, like, I think you need to have some punishment for exploiting the most vulnerable population. That's my personal viewpoint.
I think the dad that subscribed to his daughter's OnlyFans.
Wow, that is just how you show support.
But like, I think when we come to police and the prison system, we can rapidly divest so many of the functions of police and prisons to other factions. Like, I don't think drugs should be a carceral state function that should be delegated to them, or I don't think women forced into sex trafficking should be delegated to the prison or carceral state. But when it comes to like murderers and rapists and these certain things, I do think people have a right to security and safety. And once we have a socialist state, I do want some form of like policing or prison system to ensure the safety of the working class people and especially the most vulnerable, because the biggest issue with policing and the prison system is they don't ever satisfy the rights of the most disparaged populations, whether it's trans people. Like in LA, there was 3 trans women beaten by like people and no one did anything. The police drove by, or many like working class people being like beaten up by police for protesting. It's like,
or you spouting your cop loving bullshit and nobody's come by to arrest you yet. What the fuck?
But I think the police, if we're gonna have a workers state police, it has to ensure workers protections, not the capitalist protections, and that's not what police or prisons do.
River, you want to come on this one quickly? Then I would like to take us to Q&A, but I would love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I just wanted to like push back a little bit. The Reserve Army of Labor, I mean, it's definitely real. I mean, it's like directly into our monetary policy where like full employment is still like 2% unemployment. And that doesn't even include all the people who aren't seeking employment.
Even 2 is considered dangerously low.
Yeah.
I think about 3.5 is where the World Bank wants you to be.
Right, exactly. But I don't know if that is sufficient to say that like, oh, well, you know, just sort of like immigration doesn't really factor into wages or like any sort of labor power. Like, I don't think that that's quite true. I mean, because you can look at like very specific localized cases where they've deported, you know, which is brutal, and they shouldn't have done that because it was, you know, the companies that essentially brought them there or like lured them in. But like at chicken processing plants, like there's one in Georgia where they deported like 75% of their workforce and then posted an ad in the local paper, you know, advertising the same jobs but for higher wages. And so, like, I mean, it's kind of complicated. Like, the reserve army of labor definitely exists. It's definitely has its function for the capitalist class. But I do think that there are like implications for, mass migration. And I think that, as Mila was saying, like U.S. imperialism is a big contributing, factor to that. And also, yeah, the H-1Bs are, I forget which type of visa it is, but like the guest worker visas. I mean,
there's not. The H-1B is the fancy one.
I worked.
You have a bachelor's degree.
Yeah. I worked with so many people, like working in restaurants and stuff on the beach down here, who were guest workers, and I mean, a lot of them like wound up staying. Like, I mean, like there's like a joke that like every fat redneck in Gulf Shores has like a hot Ukrainian wife, which like good on those girls or whatever. But like, but the I mean, I know a girl that I worked with. She was from the Philippines, and she had like a master's degree, and she still came here to like wait tables. But like she was in like basically like a 1-bedroom apartment with 5 other girls, and they were charging her like $500 a month to stay there. And it was like all organized by like whatever contractor or whatever, like organized to get her visa, to get her employment here, and she couldn't leave. And so she's paying $500 a month to stay in a bunk bed in Gulf Shores, Alabama, where you can get like a 2-bedroom apartment for like $700. So it's insane.
Can I just add a little bit to there? I think the left lib has this narrative of like people choosing to escape their country when so many of them don't want to leave like their communities. Like, why would anyone want to leave their community in like Guatemala or Syria? But they have to because of gang violence or regime change actions because of the imperialist class,
draining of all wealth.
Or many countries like the Philippines or Latin America, where neoliberal U.S. empire has basically forced them to leave to either, or even the Eastern Bloc. Eastern Bloc has forced people into basically like sex trafficking,
Bellamy porn.
Bellamy porn, which is like literally like horrible. It's but people don't want to address this factor and like, oh, it's actually good that all these people are coming to Canada or the U.S. or Germany, but it's like they're coming here because they don't want to. They have to. We shouldn't advocate for that. Like, that's not valuing their rights or anything.
Yeah, and just real briefly on that. Sorry, just real briefly. My boyfriend is, indigenous to Mexico, Mixteco, and his whole family are, farm workers. And one thing that I learned in speaking with them and also other migrant workers is that a lot of them come here because they need to, but then hate it here because property law here is actually a lot worse than it is in other places like Mexico, right? But I do think that like we need to also sort of ground the conversation in right now, a lot of people, if they don't come here, they will starve and they will die. And so until we achieve socialism, if we are not 120% pro-immigrant, then we are reactionary. And I guess that's just where I'm coming from. And also in terms of like the reserve army of labor, I also think that in a globalized world, the outsourcing of jobs also serves as like giving the capitalists more power to be able to drive down our wages and standards. In addition to because I agree with you on the unemployment, the unemployed workers, but just the globalization of jobs also gives them more power in the bargain.
Right. So I just wanted to give one final spicy take on this topic, and we might wade back in, but if you are there with questions in the chat, all our dear listeners who are here, we're gonna be you have us here for the next 50 minutes or so to answer your questions. One thing I want to throw out at least is a tactical question about police unions. So I promised you a spicy take. Which is to say, I believe we should treat them like every other union. Which is to say that if the police unions are the labor union of a corporate, basically a for-profit corporation, which police departments are, they're contracted to the cities, and these cities sign these amazing fucking $100 million contracts every year to be like, you shall provide us public safety. I think where we as voters, citizens, rubes, whatever the fuck we are, where we should apply our pressure is to the cities making these vendor contracts in the same way that people have successfully lobbied cities to not spend the same amount of money on, renewing their public Wi-Fi infrastructure or some bullshit. Like, we should treat them like a public utility because they want to be. They all of these police departments operate under a brutal neoliberal logic. And the unions, yeah, fuck them. They're horrible. They're an opposite, and they are oppositional, but they're oppositional to the city, not to us, the voter tax-paying public. And so, while it is necessary to oppose them, I think who we should be opposing, and whose feet we should be holding to the fire is the city council. I mean, we live in San Francisco. Our dear leader, London Breed, is just a big fucking fan of cops, and yet her board of supervisors, the city council of San Francisco, is a little squeamish about them sometimes.
Yeah,
and that's where your fucking wedge is, because the San Francisco police unions are horrible, and they're just the most like unapologetic sympathizers of police violence, but they're designed to be. And this is what I kind of regard as like, in a neoliberal procurement system, which this is in the same way that the if Oracle database system, Oracle financial database system workers had a union, they would also be sitting in opposition to the the interests of the city who doesn't want to spend money on Oracle financial databases, but they do. And the same way the city spends money on policing as the sole vendor for public safety, and fuck those guys. They're really shitty. Like, let's just embrace the horror of neoliberalism and say they're a horrible version of this. They're not providing it. They're providing a horrible version of public safety. So let's do market logic and say, fuck you, we're firing you as a vendor. You are not, we shall not pay these rates for the shitty service you provide, in the same way that every corporation does. Anyway, sorry, now allow me to provide a slick transition after my rant, my neoliberal market logic rant about police. So we're going into your questions, ladies and gentlemen. If you have questions you would like our beautiful panelists to answer, then let us know. I know. I'm pretending I don't see them.
Well, click on them.
No, I was going to wait. I was trying to explain. So yeah, please throw them in the chat. We will try and get to as many of them as we can.
There.
No, I know there are. I'm pretending I don't see them.
She illiterate.
I am
As New Zealander, they don't learn how to read. They just learn how to
well, I'm sorry we didn't grow up with police having guns to our heads. I could take my dare sweet time. Have you ever heard of foreplay, motherfuckers?
As Americans, we learn how to ride dick and read. So get on it.
Not foreplay. Anyway, so there are some wonderful questions here, which we're going to start throwing out to our dear panelists, two of whom are just not here at all. So how about we throw it over to Eric and Fox? Do you want to talk about this one? Okay, Zoomer, ask, will there be a sort of prison system under socialism?
Well, yeah, there definitely will be. Like Esperanza said, which
tanky. No, I'm just kidding.
Gulags.
Of course, we need a system that, we need to put, counter-revolutionary forces and our former oppressors in. But would they be in like solitary confinement and like torture chambers? No, we would. They should be places of like re-education, and it's not the prison system that we have now wouldn't be that under socialism. We definitely need to have a structure to put people and kind of get them, you know, what's the word I'm looking for?
Murdered.
Like
rehabilitated.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Like what we should copy the China model, re-education centers.
Yeah. Can I push back on you, like as like a false character, just to like push back on the comment? So
devil's advocate.
Yeah, devil's advocate. So I watched recently the film about the Norway massacres of like a right winger who massacred 79 people, mostly students in Norway. And Norway put them in solitary. They still have like games and shit like that, but they actually became more reactionary. They became a Nazi within the prison system, which is still considered...
I do think it's a charitable reading to say they weren't Nazi when they...
No, but I know. But like they became like...
We're doing all the mass
They became
murders.
an open Nazi while under system. So I'm like, how do you prevent that while also ensuring they don't spread?
Can I put a finer point in your question, which is say that we know the harms of institutionalization.
Yeah,
we know what it does to people. It's dehumanizing, even to people who are not criminals. We know that non-violent criminals going into this institutionalization do often end up as quote unquote hardened criminals, right? As a result of there's the dehumanization of institutionalization. How do you feel about that, or do you defer that risk? Do you just say, we run that risk on certain people who are high risk?
Well, isn't that how people turn to violence? They're like ostracized from society. Like that's what radicalizes extremists. They're isolated from a culture of care. They see that this capitalist system fails them. They don't have they see every institution of like government as against them, right? So we need to care. We need to care for people. Like we can't just beat somebody on the head until they get it right. That's not how this works. Everyone deserves a chance to heal. Criminals need that support, and I mean that might be like a really upsetting thing to hear. But how else are we going to fix that problem if not by showing compassion? Like just because you're caring for somebody doesn't mean you're excusing what they did. It doesn't mean that you're sanctioning it. It's radical love, I guess you can, if you want to be all liberal about it. But I don't.
Hey.
Does that make sense? Like,
no, it does.
It needs to be a center of like rehabilitating people to not to counteract their counter-revolutionary or reactionary mindsets, because it's going to take time for people to get used to a new system. Like people can't just snap, I'm used to this social system, like collectivity and supporting, having this idea of the collective good and like working together and cooperation. It's people are going to need to there needs to be a system that helps people along with that. Because when we're in the dictatorship of the proletariat stage, it's like the most vulnerable to counter-revolutionary forces taking over, like our former oppressors taking over and overthrowing the revolution. So we really have to be mindful of all these situations that are going on internally, not just externally, but internally is really important. It's focusing on what's going on as well, and countering those people with rehabilitation.
To pick up what you said about the China model, I think people really should watch. Is it CGTN? I think is an English.
It is. Yeah,
Chinese media source.
Yeah, you can find Twink Revolution there. Not yet. Sorry.
Well, they released a lot of footage recently about like the terrorism that people in Xinjiang were facing. People were getting radicalized. Back what Mila was saying, they get radicalized by Islamist fundamentalists or extremists or the Wahhabists. They get radicalized by Wahhabists. They go back. They run their cars into crowds. They chop up people on the sidewalk. They blow people up, and that's been going on for decades. And they interview people who have gone through these re-education camps, facilities, whatever the fuck you want to call them. You cannot deny that that it hasn't had an impact, that it hasn't done something good, because they haven't had a terrorist attack in over 3 years.
Yeah.
Almost 20 years straight. Every year they had some type of mass killing by extremist Wahhabists. And they did the radical thing. And they've put a lot of Xinjiang means new frontier. It's crucial for their Silk Road initiative. And we have to do something. People like Eileen Wuornos did nothing wrong, right, ladies? Like,
well, also the Xinjiang bombings were often closely tied to Wahhabism spreading throughout the world, and
exactly.
The Uyghur Islamist faction was often recruited to be imported to Syria and now Libya and now Azerbaijan to fight often secular or Western secular governments. So it's like everyone pretending like, oh, well, it's just because they're Muslim. But like the reality is there's something more going on. There's radicalization, and to deny this faction when like other countries like France and like stuff are also going through preventative programs to deprogram Islamist radicals is like clearly one side is bad and one side is good, but like both are fighting a radicalism I don't think any left winger should ever be on the side of. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm not sure what else to add, but do you have anything else to add? Yeah,
I don't think so.
I'd love to hear somebody else's response to that.
I think River had something to talk about, like prison radicalization.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that much about the Chinese context, so I'm going to kind of stay out of that with like most things China. But I do know that like there is like a radicalism that occurs, and not just like, you know, Wahhabist sort of radicalism that occurs like in U.S. prisons as well. I mean, I have a cousin who went to prison, and he like basically like he was like you have to join a gang here, but I can't join any of the gangs because the Aryan Brotherhood tried to recruit him, but then they heard him speaking Spanish because his mom's Venezuelan, and then like they beat him up for being Venezuelan, and then he couldn't join the other ones because they said he was too white. Wow. It was like the struggle of a white Latino, I guess. But he I mean, like where I grew up, I mean, there's like documentaries that you can. I remember seeing like as an adult and being like, I know that street. Like it's about like the Aryan Brotherhood. It's a huge part of my hometown because it's a blighted community that used to be industrialized, and now all of that is gone. And people get into drugs, they get into meth, especially. They get shipped off to prison, and then they join these gangs because in like Texas, at least, like all of basically, if you go to prison, you join a gang. Like this, we have to do to survive, and all the gangs are very racialized.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you're a white person, you join the Aryan Brotherhood.
Wow.
Basically, like that's what you do, and like people end up being radicalized by that, and horrific things come out of that. I mean, there was a hate crime in my hometown when I was younger. There's a very famous hate crime close to where I grew up, James Byrd Jr., who was a black man who was like drugged behind the back of a truck by like 3 members of the Aryan Brotherhood who had all been radicalized in prisons, in the prison system in Texas. And so, I mean, it's a huge problem that I think the sort of like the way that people are dehumanized in prison, which is supposed to be this super controlled like environment, but then the fact that you have to basically like join a ideological, in many cases, like racist gang in order to just survive, breeds all sorts of problems for, not just the people inside the prison, but also the societies that they go back into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very true. I mean, Neil had wanted to comment on the extremism on the like Islamic front. Did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So
Do we all love Majid Nawaz?
God, I have like a theory about him, but I don't want to like say it in public.
Sorry, I was not trying to divert you. I just had a bit.
Get her canceled.
No, but I do have a theory. But I don't want to say it publicly because I don't want to like get sued. But go to the Gray Zone and search him up. That's all I'm gonna say. Just look up Majid Nawaz on the Gray Zone.
Search. Yeah, go to google.com and search Majid Nawaz OnlyFans, and then tab.
No, but literally, like, just look him up on, like, they did some extensive reporting on him. But when it comes to, okay, like, I think the left is really ill-equipped to talk about Islamist extremism, and I started writing an article on it, and then I was like, oh, do I want to deal with this? I'm thinking I'm gonna get really tired dealing with it, and there's gonna be no reward. But like, I don't know. I still might put it out. But I think like a lot of what's missing in this conversation about China is people just really don't understand the impact that this has on vulnerable minority communities. And to say that that's Islamophobic, I think is actually quite insulting to Muslims, because that's not like like you're essentially saying, okay, criticizing the extremists means you're criticizing the religion. Well, no, it's that you're criticizing a certain manifestation of it.
Yeah.
However,
when people say that, I was wondering, have you met Muslims? I'm always just like, do you know Muslims who are actually...
Well, it's the same with like this niqab debate, right? Like where the left is now trying to rehabilitate this idea of the niqab as like a progressive choice. Half my family is Muslim. None of them support wearing the niqab. Like it's not part of the religion.
Yeah.
No.
And
I once got yelled at by some Tunisian and like Egyptian Muslims for one rejecting socialism, also rejecting or like supporting like the right to like a full burqa, and they were like, "That's not even allowed in my country. Like, how dare you?" And I was like, "Oh, I had no idea." Like,
well, and I just and I just want to weigh it only to say that like as somebody who was sort of a new atheist, in the early 2000s or mid 2000s, that the degree to which I have had dear friends and coworkers over the years who are devout Muslims, like serious and devout Muslims, who, when I went off to get gay married, sent me beautiful wedding presents and shit like that. Like, just that this is like the kind of the dumb shit people buy into, where it's like, if you simply elevate, put it this way, if every time you want to talk about Catholicism, you go ask like the most conservative fucking bishops in Rome, yeah, I guarantee you'll get dumb fucking answers. And those people suck, and we can tell them to fuck off.
Right. Exactly. And so when it comes to China as well, like for the Uyghurs are not first of all, like even the Uyghurs are not the only Muslim group in China.
Right.
But also like the people who are imprisoned or undergoing this rehabilitation are people who have engaged in terroristic acts. That doesn't mean that, all these people are terrorists. And so when you defend people who go off to Syria and engage in, say, Christian persecution, and then say that you're defending them because you're fighting Islamophobia, you're essentially suggesting that this is what Islam is. And
right. Yeah, exactly.
and don't get me wrong, I do have my criticisms of Islam. So the other thing I wanted to say is that, and this is not against, you know, people, right? Like I said, I have family who are Muslim, I have family who are Christian, and I love them all. They're all great. None of them are crazy. But I think that religion does offer people something that can be conducive to terrorism. And I think we're kind of afraid of having that conversation a little bit. And that's not necessarily the fault of the individual. It's actually the fault of these societies for failing to provide. And so
that was the sort of the point I think I was edging towards, and please feel free to pick this up or ignore it, but only to say that once again, you know, as a family of proud fucking Catholic weirdos who are totally pleasant and fine with my flagrant homosexuality over generations, you know, 85-year-old Italian women being all like, oh honey, yeah, you shouldn't choose me to be your boyfriend, like despite being very devout Catholics. There's just it gives too much fucking credit to the weirdo extremists who are like, I'm going to go bomb an abortion clinic for fun.
Yeah,
and to represent people, and this is a different argument from the lib version, which says we simply cannot critique this religion. I think the religion fucking sucks. I think it's horrible, but it's only to say that there are degrees, and what we should be willing to do is say, you know what, if this is your version of it, it brings you some fucking joy, good on you. I'm not going to be joining you on Sunday, but that's fine. However, there are clearly some people within your church who are horrible and like literally want to do physical harm to me.
Mm-hmm.
I want to jump in and add too that is actually it after 9/11 it came to light that the Wahhabist ideology that we printed for the Taliban for the Mujahideen to fight communism in Afghanistan is being printed and distributed in prisons in New York. And
my God.
so prisons, kind of like what River was saying with like gangs and shit. Prisons are a place for radicalization, for extremism and for terrorism, and people, they find solace in that. They fall for that. Oh, there's an enemy we have to fight, and the enemy is are these people who they're not real Muslims. Like we're the, you know, gosh, I don't know how to.
No true Scotsman.
Yeah, right, exactly.
No true Welshman.
Yeah, no true Welshman.
No true Welshman in your case, yeah.
Right. And so the cure is, you know, it's radical love. You don't need to point a gun at somebody to make it stop. Like you can be strict and you can enforce things without threatening people with death. And and again, I will add, like the threat of death for making a mistake is terrifying. We can't govern by creating criminals. We can't let the ruling class use fear to police us. And so this ideology is spreading. It's spreading all over China. There are people. There's an ethnic group called the Hui. I think I'm saying that right. The Hui. Yeah, the Hui Muslims. They're starting to wear like hijabs and niqabs. Like that is foreign to their culture.
Yeah.
They don't. You know, they're Muslims, but they don't wear that stuff. That's the Wahhabist thing.
Well, even in childhood, you see more children being dressed in like full niqab when usually it wasn't until after maturity. And it's like, why are you putting like the veil on like 10-year-olds when like they're not even sexually mature? That's kind of like creepy. Like,
right.
Well, can I pull it back to a slightly different, or slightly more abstract discussion and say that like I feel like the left is bad at calling out actual threats.
Yeah.
As in put it this way, ignoring the, sorry, I don't mean to say ignoring the China situation, and to say, to pull it back domestically, you would say that there have been times in our history in the US, say, where religious domination, particularly say evangelical Christian domination, have been very real.
Mm-hmm.
And there are times when it is totally irrelevant to the actual political moment, and then it comes, it goes back and forth. Would anyone care to say anything about sort of religion in general, or just where that lives in our society? And
would I?
I have some things to say about it. Yeah.
As maybe I'll go to Esperanza first, just because I have not heard from her in a while.
Yeah.
What do you got to say about religion?
Yeah, so
Get canceled.
Go for it.
Get canceled by God.
Yeah, so what was I going to say? So I actually have a degree in theology. Before my transition, I almost became a priest. I don't know if y'all know that. And
what? We did not know that.
Oh my God.
No, you buried the lead, Esperanza. What the fuck?
Yeah.
So I have like a really wild / wacky journey with religion. But one thing I want to say is that I really dislike the whole like liberal focus on anything that is someone's personal belief cannot be criticized. There is a ton to criticize in religion, even if we are not like an adherent to that religion, and we should be able to criticize that. I mean, all the 4 major religions originated in slave society. Like they originated to protect slave values. And
Jesus is
I was
canceled.
actually really sort of like pro. I mean, he's been canceled, or at least so okay, real quickly, I don't want to take us too off topic, but like what people need to realize about Christianity also is that mainstream Christianity is Pauline Christianity. Pauline Christianity was created by a man, Paul, who fell on a pebble road and claimed to have a vision of Jesus. And the teachings this vision taught him were completely diametrically opposed to the teachings of the Council of Jerusalem, which are actually constituted by blood relatives of Jesus. So what most people think is Christianity is completely disconnected from the historical figure of Jesus. And you should read Reza Aslan's book, but don't follow him on Twitter because he's a Warren stan and he's like a really gross liberal now. And it's so sad when academics you love become like Warren supporters or just liberals in general. But but his book is good. Just don't follow him on Twitter. But I like what Jose Maria Sison says, who's the sort of ideological leader of the Communist Party of the Philippines, which is that like we recognize that religion is pretty regressive, right? But at the same time, like communist society tolerates it, right? Like especially because religion is so tied in with culture. But that doesn't mean that, we shouldn't be able to critique, for example, veiling as a patriarchal practice, which occurs not only in Islam,
Esperanza,
but also
can I? I mean, it's just I would love you to clarify the point and to say that thinking about societies we know that went very hardline communist and hardline atheist were not necessarily societies that looked like ours in terms of their relationship to the church and its social control it exercised over all of society, right?
Sorry, can you repeat
just
that
sort of saying, like,
I think I might have
we love you, Esperanza. No, sorry, just saying, sorry, you were making a wonderful point. I just wanted to kind of to reinforce or to challenge the point and to say that
the idea the church
in something
had
like
more...
something like the church, put it this way, to be a Catholic in America in 2020 doesn't have the same power over your life, your morality, how you view your relationship to society as it did maybe in say 1917 Russia, and that therefore some of the hardline atheism of communist societies of old was maybe contingent or based upon the conditions that already existed in those societies.
Absolutely. And I think the point you just made actually is so critical and actually needs to be spoken about more, because a lot of, communist Marxists think that we have to like vehemently oppose religion. I think if you come at it from any sort of like scientific perspective, we know we cannot prove there is some divine being, we're not going to base our policy off of that. But at the same time, we don't need to militantly oppose religion because, like you said, it doesn't have the same control over people's lives that it did before. In the same way that the Catholic Church is no longer the largest landowning institution as it was before. Things change. And so I think it's okay for us to be tolerant of people's religion while still understanding that we cannot make policy off of some, idea of some omnipotent man in the sky. But also one thing I want to say is that although I'm not a Marxist humanist, I do think there's something to be said that human beings have a religious function or a spiritual function, and that needs to get fulfilled somehow. And I think that communist society would open up, and liberate that religious function for us to express it in different ways than we see now.
Yeah, we know some good religious communists.
Fox, did you want to go?
Yeah,
I
have a lot to say about this.
Period.
Period. So I find, so I went through like this phase where I was like really, really angry atheist. And I just like, I kept it to myself mostly, but I like just thought people who adhered to any religion were stupid. I was an angry 18-year-old, 17-year-old high school student. Because I was, I was young, I was gay, I was in a very conservative area, and people would like use Jesus as a weapon against me. And so I was really angry. But I think that Esperanza's right. It doesn't have like the effect, the colonial power it used to have. But a lot of churches in the United States own a lot of hospitals. And I don't think that's right. I don't think that they should be able to own hospitals. So I think that we, like, if I support, people having their religion and things like that. I think it's a wonderful thing that community, when we celebrated Christmas, we went to the church with my family, with my mom's family. And there's community there. And I think that's wonderful. But at the same time, I think that they shouldn't be able to own churches. I think that's really fucked up. Personally, I find a lot of, again, Esperanza said humans have this spiritual functionality. The way I view religion now is that that our ancestors worshipped the earth, and they gave it names. They named the sky, and they named the sun, and they named the moon. They gave it,
most of which we can't say anymore without being cancelled.
Right. They gave them, stories and mythology and stuff like that. And I think that's really, really great. And I think I think they're useful and beautiful literary tools. But also it can give a sense of community to share those stories and share that common mythology. I guess, a lot of Disney movies retell a lot of folk tales and fairy tales, and no matter how many times they retell them, we fucking eat that shit up. And I don't know, I just think there's something really, really great about writing songs about having sex with the moon. And watch out for my mixtape.
Eric, did you want to add anything about religion and the left?
No, I think Esperanza and Fox is pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah,
I wanted to make sure you got your viewpoint in.
I don't really have a problem with it. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. Like, under communism, like I think, yeah, it would be here. A lot of people think that it's like we're anti-religious people, or no, we're not. Like we would. That's totally fine. I mean, I don't really have anything else to add to that.
And I think that we really need to assert that we're not anti-religious.
We're just anti-ugly. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, especially because like when back to Uyghurs, the like mainstream media and the like corporate ruling class media is like China's tearing down these mosques, but they'll have like an aerial view of like an empty place that have a building there that's really obscure, and like we don't really know what it is. But China is one of the, like Islam is growing in China. It's growing. Like they're leading the world in female imams. So to my knowledge, I think from what I've heard from people who live in China and people who have been to China, it's one of the most tolerant places for religious diversity. And I think that's pretty fucking awesome. And I think that the ruling class use that perspective like to fearmonger fundamentalist Christians in the United States. I don't.
Mila, do you want to go next and give your thoughts?
So, I mean, I think that you need to approach religion from a materialist perspective, and I think that the way that it operates in terms of exercising power is going to be very different depending on the political society in question. So my area, like when I was a grad student in political science, and also just from my family background, has been looking at the Middle East. And the way that religion impacts politics there is very different than the way that it does in the United States. Religion is kind of conceived of almost in like your religious group, especially in Lebanon, your religious group is like your ethnic group to an extent. But I think that what religions do in these places, and I think they to an extent do this in places like America, less so in Canada, is that they fill a hole where radical activism could be. And so a lot of my research has been particularly, especially a lot of it was on the Egyptian protests in 2011. And what I found was that, so everyone knows the Muslim Brotherhood came in power, and they had a very conservative, reactionary constitution, and not in like a way like, and it was also like, the Islamist groups in the Middle East have actually been becoming liberalized, so they've been more palatable to Western powers. There are think tanks in the US that are providing these absurd defenses of like the Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamist groups. So they're actually losing a lot of even like the fake radicalism they might have promised decades ago. They used to kind of be more like, oh, okay, we're going to fight for the poor. And now they're just like, they've become subsumed into capitalism as well. That said, they do offer something that I think that leftist groups fail to offer people. And that is they offer a comprehensive worldview. And what I mean by that is they offer a worldview that explains why people are suffering to them, and it explains how to alleviate that suffering. I think sometimes the left has an explanation on why people are suffering, but first of all, it tends to be exclusionary, and it tends to explain maybe the suffering of specific groups while excluding others. So it lacks a universalist theory, whereas religion tends to do better at providing a universalist theory. And then they also provide a pathway to alleviating these struggles. We don't really see that with a lot of leftist groups, but part of it is the left's fault. Part of it is that religious groups often have much more funding because they have a sort of international appeal. So like the Islamic nationalism the idea behind Islamic nationalism is that, you know, okay, this is an international group, like we're an international nation, the Ummah, like, you know, we're just like all one. And that's kind of the idea behind it. It's not the same as having like a nationalism that's contained to one country. And so Islamist groups are able to garner support from other nations. Not, and I think, you know, during the time of the USSR, socialist nations were able to do that as well. Now, not so much. I don't think socialist organizations in the US or Canada are able to do much at all. In Canada, we can't even, like, we've been trying to pass like pharmacare for so long, and I know it's nothing compared to like in the US where you guys don't even have like care, but like we can't pass, like we should have pharmacare by now and we don't.
Yeah.
And so it's just, you know, I get the appeal, and my explanation of the appeal has always, not has always, because I had a weird, edgy new atheist phase as well. But I do think that, you know, until we provide better alternatives, then I totally understand why people get so dogmatically absorbed into religion. Or patriotism. I see them both as very similar.
Yeah.
And we kind of need to offer some sort of community, and that's something that's universalist. Because, like I said, the left is not good at being universalist right now. There's that tweet that I got in trouble for quote tweeting, the one that was like, "White people have zero radical potential," and I was kind of like, "Great."
Oh my God, I couldn't deal with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask. So River,
That was so
you,
silly.
yeah, River wrote an article, something about let me see if I can paraphrase the title. I love Jesus, and if you don't, you're gonna burn in hell, you fucking sinners. Was that right,
that.
River? What was the title?
Close enough. The article is called "Stock Trading for God," and that comes from a guy that I found who was being like basically roasted on Twitter, like very widely, for basically like outing himself as like somebody who had gone through like conversion therapy and was like married to a woman and that sort of thing. And I thought that was sort of fucked up that people were, I don't know, just being like such a dick to this guy, because I grew up like in a really strict like evangelical home, and like, I mean, like that could have been me if like I had less strong will or something, or like had just gone a different way, and like, but I wound up like clicking on his Twitter profile, and I was going to send him a message. Actually, I did send him a message. It was just like, "Hey, I'm sorry people are being dicks to you," or whatever. But I found like he had his like blog linked, and I clicked on the blog, and it was called "Stock Trading for God," which is where the name of the article
Say
came from.
all time top 10 blog titles.
Yeah, and it just sort of interested me because of the entire like Marx's comments on religion, which are mostly summed up in his essay, which is like critique of Hegel's something on the right, which is where the comment as where he says religion is the opium of the people. And I think that, you know, I mean, this guy's like a stock trader, right? So he's not clearly like not part of the working class, but I think he still had this sort of need to feel something in his life. I think that like what people often, I mean, Marxism should be about the working class, but I think there is like a sort of spiritual emptiness in like the modern sort of neoliberal capitalist world that goes even like upwards towards like the upper class, like the bourgeois, and like they still feel a need to sort of justify themselves, whether it be through religion, like this guy was, or I mean, I shared an article today about like these like rich people in New York who had basically recreated like the sharecropper economy. But, like, seemed to have convinced themselves like that they were doing good.
Yep.
And like there's all these mental tricks that people play because I think people genuinely do want to be good. They want to be a part of something sort of bigger than themselves. And that can come oftentimes traditionally has come through religion, which is why like I have a quote pulled up where I said in the article, religion gives individuals meaning, purpose, and most importantly, hope in a directionless society plagued by scarcity, deprivation, and atomization. And to destroy religion in a society in which all these attributes still exist is simply to reassign the functions of religion elsewhere. And I think I stand by that because I think that, like, you know, we are, you know, from a very early age are sort of faced with our own mortality, and we have to find ways of dealing with that. And I've been very explicit that like Marxism was a way for me to deal with that, because I had grown up with religion, and I when I started backing away from that, I was like, well, it wasn't simply enough for me to just be like, okay, well, I'm leaving a religion, I'm just gonna like, you know, live you know, look out for myself, get a job, you know, just sort of get by, you know, get a boyfriend, just sort of party or whatever, even though I did all those things.
Hey, River, let me just say, because you are the one of the few people I've ever edited who got the quote correctly. There's a question in the chat.
Yeah.
Fuck, sorry. There, that one. My click's off. Wasn't there a second half to the quote from Marx about religion being an opiate? Because you are the one of the few people I know who quoted it correctly.
Yeah, it's the second part
Cry of the oppressed.
The cry of the oppressed. Well, the full quote that I quoted is, religious suffering is at one and the same time the expression of real suffering and a protest against real suffering. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions is the opium of the people. And that is why I think that people just take the opium of the people part and just leave everything else out that Marx said and just say like, oh, well, you know, it's religion is just a way to keep people from, you know, seeing the material world, and it sort of like dulls their senses and like keeps them complacent. And I guess you know, you can make an argument for that, but I also think that, like, I mean, unless you have a revolutionary project that you can get them on board to, unless you're offering an alternative, I think it's cruel to take that away from people, because you know, people, and you really can't, like, they will just, I mean, the entire decline, we can see like in the United States, like religion has declined, but it's led to, especially among sort of the professional sort of classes. I mean, like where
You're all atheists. It's fine.
Yeah, in the working class, even if people aren't like really, at least like where I grew up, I mean, it could be different other places, but like where I grew up, like most people, you know, even if they were either went to church or if they didn't go to church, they still like believed in God. You know, and like, but
yeah, let me
educated classes in the United States don't. And so what do they replace that with? And it's a sort of like woke capitalist sort of liberalism, or some sort of like BLM, like radical like
socialism TM
sort of, you know,
let me cut in. Sam, you how are you, how godly are you? How close to God are you?
So
how much do you need to save your soul?
I view myself as like a lifelong atheist, where I grew up like learning some of the basic stuff, but never really was forced to take on any of the religious ideology. And my viewpoint's always been kind of like, religion's fine, but I don't need to have to like partake in the belief that it's actually the truth or the way people should operate. So my current view on religion is very similar to Rivers. Like, religion is a way for people to feel comfortable and safe in a system of highly precarious situations. Like my family, I'd say, is spiritual.
Would you say it was an opiate in the masses?
Sure, whatever. My family's like spiritual because it gives comfort in the world when there's so little stability of their material security. But I think as Marxists, so many, probably like the 19-year-olds online, wanted to just be like, oh, well, we can't ever criticize these things, even though all religion is immaterial. Religion is based in, it's nonsense. Like, it's not material. There's no factual or scientific basis to it. And
Citation needed.
I think we can understand the reality that religion plays a role in people feeling secure, while also recognizing we don't have to take it on as the actual truth to the world, because in the end, like, religion, when given power, is always used to subjugate the lower classes, whether it's the Hindus or the Christians or Muslims. It's always used to reinforce a patriarchal, anti-worker mindset. And I think we as leftists, organized at one point in society, the goal is to make more society secular by providing alternative security through collective unity, so they no longer need religion for a feeling of belonging, but instead of belonging through building a greater society that gives everyone full liberation. So that's my viewpoint on.
Well,
yeah, and that was the point of my article. That's like kind of what I closed with.
Yeah.
Is like we have like an opening, like we have like people are looking for something. People are looking for a project that's bigger than themselves, and Marxism, can provide that for people.
Well, yeah. Let me give a plug and say, yeah, no, I was raised by an ex-Catholic, which is a strange kind of damage. I mean, to be raised by Catholics is one kind of damage, but my parents like to joke they went too far. They went overboard, correcting the Catholicism. And yeah, no, it is an interesting point to say when religion is powerful, it's a very different beast, but it is not powerful in our society, and so we should respond accordingly.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's so much to say, but you will hear all about that on the next More Marxists You Can Handle 1 month from today. Ish. We'll schedule it. Don't worry. Look it up.
Yeah.
In the meantime, let me run through all of you and tell the dear listeners where they can find more of you.
Yeah, drop your plugs.
Where the people find more of you.
Yeah, so on Twitter at N-Class Society, I have my little link tree that I made, so you can find things that I'm about to publish there.
Yeah, Esperanza has some amazing writing. I really cannot recommend strongly enough Esperanza's writing. It's been very influential on me. It's in ways that most things aren't. Eric Fox, where do people find more of you and the Red Lettuce?
Well, you can find us on Twitter at the Lettuce Red, and our personal Twitters, Eric Unger 89 and Solidarity Fairy. Naturally,
such a good handle. Solidarity Fairy, one of my favorite handles on Twitter.
And then you can find us mostly our channels on YouTube. It's the Red Lettuce, so please subscribe. And if you don't, we'll put you in a gulag.
Yep. No, and we will also put you in a gulag. Mila, where do people find you and your gulag?
So yeah, my Twitter is right here, and the camera doesn't have. I was trying to do something cool.
It worked pretty well.
So yeah, I'm pretty loud and obnoxious there. So my podcasts are both on the regular podcast platforms, so Unacceptable and Huge If True. Definitely check out our interview with Norm Finkelstein. Like I said, quite.
Oh my God! Stop crying!
Quite a character. But don't cry in front of him. Actually, that was really as a side note. He kind of went off against one of our co-hosts because he thought that my co-host was suggesting he experienced discrimination. And Norm's you don't understand discrimination.
The most difficult podcast interview since Amy Therese.
Oh my God.
Really difficult. I would love to have both him and Amy. I think they have very similar personalities.
You would not. I mean, it'd be hello, welcome to that. And that would be the last word you got in. I love Amy. I adore her. She is a friend. But yeah, that's
Yeah,
I do not know how to control the beast.
Yeah.
I'm not a strong enough man.
That's the price you pay for supporting strong Lebanese women.
Well, but I feel like I get a word in with you. I just talk over you most of the time, honestly.
Yeah, it's true. I've been trained to be more submissive. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. Shut up, Mila.
It's my
Even Pinker taught you.
Catholic education. Yeah, so check out, like, I'm on Twitter. I have a Substack, like, for blogging. It's just my last name .substack.com.
Go Ryeb. You have good spelling's left as an exercise to the reader, but it is a good read. Gotta say, big fan.
Yeah, I write about
it is linked. I will just throw a plug and say it is linked from Mila's article on twinkrev.com.
Period.
Which is called The Untenable Politics of Trauma. And it's very good. So if you Google that, you'll find both the Twinkrev article she wrote for us and her own Substack. River, how do people find more of you, you stupid faggot?
They can find all of my stupid faggotry at twinkrev.com, or they can find me on Twitter at Lefty Otter. I've got like 5 articles on Twinkrev and one that I will be working on tonight. So hopefully it will be out soon.
You'll be in the after party. All right. Well, and to all of you who have joined us, thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here, and we'll see you again in 1 month, or in the weird ad hoc shit we all do together. Play it out, Sam.
Yeah.
Elena.